Chapter 58. She turned to see that Mo Jingshan had already gone to settle the bill. Jin Wan unhurriedly held onto his arm. "Hubby, the weather is good today. How about we shop a little longer?" Seeing this lovey-dovey scene, the two employees secretly spat in their hearts. This woman was really shameless. After buying her a phone, she directly called him hubby. With such a beautiful appearance, she really thought of herself as a vixen. Mo Jingshan's entire body exuded an unapproachable coldness. However, he only treated the woman by his side with gentleness and patience. His arm reached around her waist, gently holding her as they walked out. His clear voice entered the employee's ears. "Before 3 in the afternoon, all of my time belongs to Mrs. Mo. Where else do you want to shop? This business street is enough. There's no need to walk too far. The shopping malls in front are not bad. Let's go there, how about it?" The shop owners looked at each other in shock. "Oh, Mrs. Mo?" There were not many people with the surname Mo in Haicheng. Those with the surname Mo who were rich and seemed to have an extraordinary background were even fewer. They rushed to flip through the recent magazines and newspapers. After searching for a long time, they finally found a photo with Mo Jingshan's side profile. After taking a few glances, the employee's eyes almost fell out. That man earlier, his identity was indeed not simple. He was actually Mo Jingshan? In the photo there was even Jin Wan's side profile. It's really Mo Jingshan and Mrs. Mo? Our words earlier. Mrs. Mo should have heard it, right? What should we do? Did we offend them? The employee at the cashier glanced at them and rolled her eyes. Not only did Mrs. Mo hear it, even I can hear it from here. Do you think Mr. Mo heard it? He definitely heard it. Then what should we do? Mr. Mo doesn't even bother to look at you. You guys you have eyes but cannot see. Gossiping. You're destined to be useless for the rest of your lives. You deserve it. The employee's expressions immediately turned cold. Jin Wan had already left the shop. After walking a distance, she glanced at Mo Jingshan, who remained expressionless. You heard it earlier, didn't you? Mo Jingshan's tone was calm. Mrs. Mo's appearance is exceedingly beautiful. Because of this face, people often misunderstand that you have a mistress. I think there's no need for you to care about those two small companies. Just stay at home and be taken care of by me for the rest of your life. Jin Wan's eyes twitched. No matter how she heard it, she could hear the ridicule in his words. It's already past 1 o'clock. There are less than 2 hours before you go to the company at 3 o'clock. Jin Wan said as she walked. Do you want to eat something first? Hungry? Not yet. I ate the breakfast my husband personally made this morning and was stuffed. I don't feel hungry yet. Jin Wan followed by Mo Jingshan's side and did not forget to flatter him. I'll go back to the company after I'm done shopping. Let me know if you're hungry. What Jin Wan didn't know was that although the employees in the electronics store didn't meet with a sudden mishap, they still suffered because of the words they shouldn't have said. The manager suddenly called. Which two people dared to gossip behind someone's back? Hurry up and get them to pay this month's salary and scram. The two employees immediately rushed to answer the phone with a frightened expression. They said miserably, "Manager, we really didn't do it on purpose. Earlier we didn't recognize Mr. and Mrs. Mo. We only said a few words casually. We didn't want to offend. Don't explain to me. Right now, the two of you have already been placed on our blacklist. Leave immediately." The manager directly hung up. In order to save time, Jin Wan did not walk too far. She only strolled around the nearby shopping mall and then went to a large supermarket inside. The room in Aolan International was too simple. There weren't many daily necessities, so she bought a lot of daily necessities including pajamas and new towels. In the end, she even bought a set of especially comfortable blankets. Those who didn't know would think that the two of them were preparing for their wedding. In fact, for Jin Wan, this was the first time she had carefully filled a home that belonged to them. Although the Yew Garden was their wedding home, Aolan International was the closest to his company. She wanted to make their second home more lively. Before returning, Jin Wan dragged Mo Jingshan to a nearby Chinese restaurant for a simple meal. This Chinese restaurant had been open for many years. Because the food was good and the price was not expensive, she had also eaten there several times in the past 10 years. However, every time she came she was alone, and she could only order the cheapest dish and a bowl of rice. When they were about to return to Aolan International, she sat in the car and said, "Just drop me off at the gate of the neighborhood. I'll bring my things in to tidy up. You can go straight to the company." Mo Jingshan glanced at the time. "There's no hurry. I'll send you up." Jin Wan glanced at the pile of spoils she bought today in the car. Considering that she really couldn't carry so much, she did not refuse. The two returned to Aolan International. Mo Jingshan was carrying too many things in his hands. Jinwan pressed the password to the door. As expected, the password was her birthday. She turned to look at Mo Jingshan. The moment the door opened, he had already taken the things in. Earlier in the supermarket, I didn't feel that I bought much. Only now do I realize that I really bought too much. Jinwan squatted on the ground and rummaged through the large pile of shopping bags. Mo Jingshan watched her. It was just a few daily necessities, but she was so satisfied as though she had obtained some treasure. There are a lot of things. You won't be able to finish them by yourself. Call Andy Chin to help you. Mo Jingshan's tone was light. Hearing this, Jinwan suddenly stood up, turned and quickly walked to the door. She reached out and hugged his waist like a reluctant little wife. When will you be back? Not too late. I'll be back after a meeting and looking at some company documents. Mo Jingshan touched her hair. Jinwan was used to him treating her like a child. She buried her face in his chest. Then let's stay here tonight. We'll return to the U Garden tomorrow. Mo Jingshan's hand paused on the top of her head. All right. His tone softened. Jinwan stood on her tiptoes and kissed the corner of his lips. After kissing him, she was about to return to pack up the pile of things they had just bought. However, the moment she stepped back, her waist suddenly tightened. The man's kiss landed accurately on her lips. It was not as intense as the kiss on the bed last night. Instead, it was gentle and lingering, causing Jinwan's entire heart to melt. Her two hands gripped the collar of his trench coat, her eyes fixed on his face that was inches from hers. After kissing for a while, she did not forget that they were running out of time. She subconsciously pushed him away. In the end, she did not manage to push him away. Instead, she was pressed against the wall. Their lips and teeth intertwined, and as they kissed, they forgot about each other. Chapter 59. This was a long kiss. Earlier, Jinwan had yet to remove her coat. Right now, she could not tell if it was because of the heat or because her cheeks were flushed. Her sober charm was even more alluring to the man than last night. Mo Jingshan kissed her cheeks from time to time, his hoarse voice carrying a hint of seduction. I like the pajamas you bought earlier. Remember to wear them tonight. Jinwan's face instantly turned embarrassed. Today, when she was at the mall, she had secretly bought a sexy set of pajamas when Mo Jingshan did not notice. Actually, it wasn't a particularly revealing style, but it looked quite cool. Back then she had bought it on a whim. She did not expect that he would actually see it. No, that's a summer style. Then you bought it now to leave it for a year? The man chuckled lightly by her lips, kissing her again. I have many clothes at home that I forget to wear after buying them. There are even some that I leave for 2 years. This won't change even if I leave it for a year. She had yet to finish speaking when she felt his grip on her waist tighten. She raised her head to see that his eyes were fixed on her, and his hand was placed on her waist. Her heart trembled from his stare. Jinwan shifted her eyes away and softly opened her mouth. Her tone was somewhat coquettish as she begged for mercy. All right, I'll wear it. Although they had bought quite a lot of things, thankfully the house was very tidy. All Jinwan needed to do was to open the packaging of the newly bought items and place them where they should be placed. After tidying up for around an hour, she glanced at the time on her phone. It was already past 4 o'clock. It had been less than 24 hours since her accident last night. There was no sound of knocking on the door of the Mo Corporation CEO's office. A tall figure dressed in a long dark gray coat directly walked in. There were no obstructions and no one dared to block his way. A set of documents was directly thrown onto the office table. Mo Jingshan did not look at the person who entered. He closed the documents in his hands and took a glance. His voice was heavy and his tone was bone-chilling. The Zhou family's background, just these few pages? The man standing in front of the office table coldly narrowed his eyes. He coldly snorted. The Zhou family is not simple. Otherwise, that Zhou Yinyan would not have the guts to lay her hands on your woman. A sparrow may be small, but it has all of its internal organs. After reading this, you will know what they have been doing in private for the past few years. With the strength behind them, they will definitely die a terrible death if they go against us openly. However, they did not dare to make any big moves in the open. They also understand that they will not gain any benefits if they go against us head-on. But if they frequently use underhanded methods, a young lady like Jinwan, who has a clean background, will easily become food for them. Mo Jingshan did not make to speak. To Mo? That's because Jinwan was quick to react and knew how to protect herself. Mo Jingshan's tone was cold. If something had really happened to her last night, right now, that surnamed Zhou would not even have the chance to lie in the emergency room and cry out in pain. The man in front of the desk coldly snorted. Based on last night's situation, it was indeed possible that Mo Jingshan would kill Zhou Yanyan. The office door was suddenly knocked on. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at him. "Come in." Shenmu walked in. The moment he saw Mo Jingshan sitting behind the desk, he turned to look at Nan Heng, whose eyes were dark and bewitching as he stood in front of the desk with a faint smile. Nan Heng was a frequent customer here. Shenmu did not treat him as an outsider and directly said in a low voice, "COMO, the Zhou Group's chairman and vice president wish to see you. They have been here for a long time, but I did not allow them to come up and delayed it until now. Right now it's almost time to get off work." Mo Jingshan's cold and indifferent eyes immediately glanced at Nan Heng, who did not show any signs of shock. "Your men are dead?" "Nan Heng. This Zhou Group's old chairman is already old. 2 days ago he was still lying in the hospital. Today he actually has the ability to stand up and come here. He has clearly been avoiding the previous conflict. Right now he doesn't want to offend the Mo family because of his ignorant granddaughter, so he can only come here with his old life to try and whitewash everything." Nan Heng's smile was cold. "My men can stop the Zhou family's bunch of useless people and control the Zhou family's movements. But who the F***K would have thought that this old fart would actually be able to jump up from the hospital?" Mo Jingshan glanced at the documents on the table, his cold and indifferent voice hinting at something. "Right now he's being watched by our men. How much ability does he have to whitewash this incident?" Nan Heng rubbed his chin, chuckling softly. "Before the power behind the Zhou family clashed with us, he was the last seemingly decent bargaining chip. However, in the end his calculations were wrong. Even if this old fart brought his head here, it would be useless." Mo Jingshan stared at the documents on the table and did not speak for a long time. The office was silent for a moment. Nan Heng suddenly raised his brows. "You've left America for so many years. It's been a long time since you've touched the underground business circle." It was still quiet. Mo Jingshan did not make a sound. The temperature in his eyes was extremely low. Nan Heng stared at him for half a minute, expressionlessly saying, "Don't tell me for that woman Jinwan you're going to..." Mo Jingshan casually pushed the documents on the table. The documents slid to the end of the table. His tone was light. "Since we're all old friends, if I can regain control of this circle's economic lifeline and avenge Jinwan, why not?" Nan Heng raised his brows, his eyes containing a hint of mockery. "After so many years, I've only just realized that there's actually a woman who can change your decision to not look back. Back then you left so cleanly. Now it's just for a Jinwan you actually..." Nan Heng paused for a moment before chuckling meaningfully. "Could it be that the power of the marriage certificate is really too great? Or does she really have some ability? It seems like I can't help but look at Miss G in a different light." Mo Jingshan's voice was as light as snow. "Compared to you, who could abandon your newlywed wife in America for 2 years and not even see her face to face, I'm ashamed of my inferiority." "Nan Heng..." The phone on the office table began to vibrate. Mo Jingshan glanced at it and saw that it was a call from Qin Sighting. He reached out to pick it up. "Still in the office?" Qin Sighting's lazy voice was mixed with a hint of laughter. "What's the matter?" "Your wife suddenly ran to our hospital earlier." Mo Jingshan's brows moved. "She went to the hospital?" Chapter 60. Qin Sighting's voice was lazy as he chuckled softly. "I'm guessing that she won't be able to stay idle tonight. She should be planning on taking revenge. Earlier, I saw her enter a sex toy store near the hospital and buy a bottle of that thing." Mo Jingshan placed the phone down. His gaze was calm and distant. "Han Tianyuan is still in the bar on the east side of the city?" he calmly asked. Zhou Yanyan was still lying in the hospital. If Jin Wan wanted a taste of her own medicine, she could only look for Han Tianyuan. Nan Heng had heard the contents of the call earlier. He coldly said, "From last night until now, he did not dare to return to the Han family. The Han family stocks fell overnight. Everyone is in a mess. For now, no one is thinking about whether this trash is dead or alive. He hid in the small bar, drunk and dreaming for an entire day and night. Right now he should already be unconscious. Do you want to stomp his hand or stomp his family jewels? You can make him bleed at any moment." Mo Jingshan was indifferent. "Don't touch him for now. Wait for Jinwan to go over. Let her do it herself." Since she wanted revenge, he would give her a satisfying chance. After hearing this, Nan Heng snorted. "Let her do it herself? Then do I have to send a few bodyguards to follow her secretly and make her think that she was able to take down Han Tianyuan, this grandson, with her own abilities? Mo Jingshan indifferently curved his lips. That's good. Nanheng coldly mocked. After knowing you for more than 10 years, I've discovered that you, Mo Jingshan, are really deranged when it comes to spoiling women. Mo Jingshan indifferently glanced at him. Too ashamed to show your face? Nanheng's lips curved into a cold smile. Jinwan held the test report in her hands. The drug that Zhou Yanyan had given her was indeed something rarely seen on the market called the aphrodisiac dew. It was similar to the more famous Viagra in America. It was one of the most effective drugs. Too much of it was smeared on the cup. As long as one's saliva touched it, it was enough to stimulate one's spirit and cause one to be affected by the drug. In front of the small bar on the east side of the city, Jinwan had several young hooligans that she had hired to investigate the situation. After confirming that Han Tianyuan was indeed inside, there was also another huge gain. That was, a C-list celebrity that Han Tianyuan dated last year was also inside. This celebrity had a history of drug abuse and was a scourge that everyone in the industry avoided like the plague. Jinwan coldly handed the drinks she had prepared to the hooligans, giving them a look. This matter won't implicate you. Once you're done, leave this area immediately. I'll treat it as though you never came tonight. A few punks nodded. They had done a lot of things like stealing chickens and dogs. Moreover, this beautiful woman in front of them generously gave them a lot of money. They quickly sneaked into the bar. Half an hour later, they whistled out as if nothing had happened. When they reached the door, they cast a look at Jinwan in the distance and then quietly slipped away. Jinwan paused outside for a moment before walking straight into the bar. When she arrived at the private room Han Tianyuan was in, as expected, the sound of wine bottles colliding had already turned into the unsteady breathing of a man and a woman. There were also the low moans of a woman and the rough breathing of a man. A waiter from the bar passed by. Jinwan curved her lips at the waiter and calmly placed 200 yuan bills on the tray of drinks in front of him. I'll have to trouble this little brother to help me with something. I followed my ex-boyfriend here. He cheated on several women and is fickle and heartless. I've been with him for so long, yet I've been treated like this. I really can't take it anymore, so I came here to take a look. Can you help me secretly take a photo of the inside when you deliver the drinks? As long as the angle is good, I can add another 300 yuan. Jinwan was all smiles. She originally had a face that could topple cities. Under the flickering neon lights of the private room, the young waiter's soul was immediately hooked away. He replied, I can take a photo, but you mustn't let my boss find out. Otherwise I'll lose my job. Don't worry, this is my own matter. I'll keep it a secret. After you send the photo to me, delete it. No one will implicate you. Jinwan winked at him as she spoke, waving the wallet in her hand at him. The waiter finally nodded. He took out his phone from his pocket and placed it in an inconspicuous spot on the tray. He directly knocked on the door and entered. The moment the door opened, Jinwan did not enter. She continued to stand by the wall, but she could hear the interweaving voices of the man and woman inside. It seemed like they were already in a mess. Clearly, the effects of the medicine were very fast. She had spent a large sum of money to buy the exact same medicine as last night. The waiter came out after a few minutes. When he came out, his gaze was slightly uncomfortable. After all, the scene was really too. Seeing that Jinwan was still guarding the door, he immediately asked with a look of disbelief, which one of them is your ex-boyfriend? Those men and women are directly starting on the sofa. He did not finish his words. The waiter's gaze was somewhat pitiful as he looked at Jinwan. It was as though he felt that it was a tragic experience for her to meet such a shameless man who could casually make love to a woman in a private room. Jinwan smiled slightly at him. Did you take a photo? The waiter nodded and handed the phone to her. Jinwan took the phone and flipped through several extremely erotic photos. She sent them all to her phone and then handed the 300 yuan she promised to the waiter. She turned and entered the bathroom across the corridor. In the bathroom, Jinwan anonymously sent the photo of Han Tianyuan and that third-rate celebrity on the sofa to the Han Corporation's public email account. She then casually made a call. Hello? Eldest Miss G? The person who picked up the phone was a reporter from a newspaper that Jinwan once knew. Right now, the other party had already been promoted to the editor-in-chief of a weekly gossip magazine. He loved to write about the romantic affairs of wealthy families and had a high exposure rate. I'll give you a piece of news. Whether or not you can arrive in time will depend on your own ability, Jinwan said unhurriedly. Jinwan's tone was unhurried as she said, someone reported that Han Tianyuan was taking drugs in a bar. His target was the second female lead of a recently popular television drama. The police are about to come and arrest him. Such a big piece of news, you have to hurry. Which bar? The other party's voice instantly rose as though he was afraid of missing out on such a big piece of news. Jinwan coldly curved her lips. East of the city Miyi Bar. After speaking, she directly hung up the phone. She turned back and coldly glanced at the private room that was about to turn into a mess. After confirming that the media was about to arrive, she lazily looked at the phone screen and dialed 110. A big show that even the police in the entertainment industry were alarmed. It had to be more lively. Chapter 61. She did not expect to meet him here. The last time she saw him was in the hospital where Xia Tian was staying. The other party did not seem to have noticed her. Jinwan shifted her gaze away, turning to leave the bar. Jinwan sat by the window of a nearby cafe, sipping on a light milk coffee while watching the show. The media arrived at the scene 5 minutes before the police. In this short amount of time, not only did they successfully capture Han Corporation's young master Han Tianyuan's unbearably dissolute side, but they also captured a famous third-rate female celebrity's drug scandal. They also completely solidified the fact that Han Tianyuan had been caught taking drugs in a bar with a prostitute. Han Tianyuan's disheveled appearance when he was brought out of the bar was so disgusting that it could not be more disgusting. After watching all of this, the coffee in Jinwan's cup had already turned cold. It was currently 8:30 at night. Although everything was progressing smoothly, it made her more or less a little suspicious. However, Han Tianyuan was currently hiding in a bar in dire straits. Today she heard that something had happened to the Han family in the stock market, so he probably couldn't send anyone to order around. He didn't even have a bodyguard right now, so it wasn't strange that there weren't any of his people guarding outside in this kind of small bar. Hai Cheng's nighttime was not particularly safe, especially in the east side of the city. Jinwan saw that there were 2 police cars nearby and walked out. Originally, she wanted to flag down a taxi by the roadside. All of a sudden, her phone rang with the iPhone's melodious ringtone. The moment she saw that it was Mo Jingshan's call, she could not help but raise her hands to tuck her hair behind her ears and pick up the call. Hello? Where are you? The man's voice came from the phone. It was calm and clear. Jinwan glanced at the nearby police cars. After confirming that she was safe and that there would not be any danger, she then honestly said, I'm in the east side of the city. Earlier, I dealt with some matters. Mo Jingshan's car was parked about 200 meters away from where Jinwan was. This little woman's gaze was focused on the nearby police cars and did not notice this direction. She even knew to call for a taxi when the police were nearby. It could be seen that Jinwan's sense of self-preservation was not bad. Mo Jingshan's voice was low and his tone was mild. Your new phone has a GPS function. Send it to me. Nanheng sat at the side, his cold and coquettish eyes dimming, and then he rolled his eyes. Motherf *Ker, he was clearly only 200 meters away from that woman, yet she still wanted him to send her location. Mo Jingshan's current plan? No one would believe him if he told anyone about what had happened today. Even Nanheng and Qin Sighting, who had known Mo Jingshan for more than 10 years, couldn't believe that the person coaxing Jinwan to send the location was Mo Jingshan. Jinwan was surprised. Are you coming to pick me up? I can take a taxi back. Before she could finish her sentence, the other party had already hung up. Jinwan, the Mo Corporation's building was a little far from here. She hesitated for a moment, not sure if Mo Jingshan knew what she had done tonight. Although there was nothing to hide, she looked around again. Seeing no taxi passing by, she could only pick up her cell phone and send her location to him. Earlier in the bar, Jinwan had a vengeful and fierce appearance. Now that she was being coaxed by Mo Jingshan, she did not notice the car on this side and obediently sent her location over. Nanheng sneered. If Mo Jingshan was not by the side, he would have really said the word, stupid. Behind them, there was a commotion outside the bar. The police were yelling and various men and women were crying and screaming. Jinwan stood by the side of the road. She did not turn back to look at the commotion, but she could hear how chaotic the scene was tonight. Several minutes later, the black ghost stopped in front of her. The car window slowly rolled down, revealing Mo Jingshan's calm and gentle face. The man had a cool and gentle demeanor, his hands casually resting on the steering wheel. There was no one else in the car. Jinwan was slightly surprised. So fast? I was nearby earlier. I was on the way to pick you up. Mo Jingshan did not explain further. On the way. The east side of the city was considered the least prosperous area in Haicheng. The quality of the people living here was not high, and it was very chaotic. Mo Jingshan rarely came to this area. Why was it such a coincidence that it was on the way? On the way back, Jinwan was slightly drowsy. Being in Mo Jingshan's car allowed her to lower her guard. A sense of security surrounded her, and she was filled with drowsiness. Last night she did not sleep much. Under his body her energy was running low, but in the end, it did not end as she wished. Again and again, no matter how she begged, it was useless. He only let her go in the wee hours. This entire day she did not rest much. Although Jinwan was prepared in the bar earlier, she was still somewhat on guard to prevent any mistakes from happening. Right now, all her emotions and senses were relaxed. She closed her eyes and almost fell asleep. However, her stomach was still slightly hungry. She resisted the sleepiness and opened her eyes to look out of the car window. She saw that the car had already arrived near Aolan International. "You didn't eat tonight?" Mo Jingshan asked. In the afternoon, the two of them had casually eaten at the commercial street. Furthermore, it was already 9 o'clock. It would be a lie to say that they were not hungry. Jinwan nodded and then glanced at him anxiously. Seeing her expression as though she had something to say, Mo Jingshan only glanced at her. He drove the car to Aolan International's parking lot. The car stopped and he calmly said, "There's a restaurant nearby. What do you want to eat?" Jinwan unbuckled her seatbelt. "Let's go home to eat. We've already arrived at Aolan International. Just in time. Let's go back to eat." Mo Jingshan watched her. His eyes seemed to contain an endless ocean. His voice was clear. "Go home? What?" Jinwan suddenly chuckled. "I'll eat whatever you cook." Mo Jingshan, several seconds later, his lips curved into a thin smile. His voice was mild. "Since when do I have to be responsible for cooking your dinner?" Jinwan rubbed her hungry stomach and stared at him anxiously. "It's already so late. We'll have to sleep soon after eating. The food in the restaurant won't be easy to digest. Why don't we eat some noodles? So we'll just go home and cook some noodles?" "I'll cook noodles?" Mo Jingshan's handsome brows moved slightly. "That's right." Jinwan's gaze clearly said, she really wanted to eat. After all, this was the first time she had eaten Mo Jingshan's personally cooked breakfast. She had thought about it for the entire day and felt that it was not too much to ask for a bowl of noodles. Mo Jingshan watched her gaze and chuckled softly. "Get off the car." And Jinwan first responded before raising her eyes to look at him. "You agree?" Mo Jingshan did not reply. He had already gotten off the car. Jinwan rushed to open the car door and follow. There was a small supermarket near Aolan International's parking lot. It was very down-to-earth and friendly. Jinwan followed Mo Jingshan in and watched as Mo bought some seasonings and noodles. She then saw Mo pass a black card to the lady boss of the supermarket because he did not bring any cash with him to the company in the afternoon. Chapter 62. The moment the lady boss saw the black card, the corner of her lips twitched. She knew that there were many rich people living in this area, but if they had to swipe a black card just to buy a green onion or 2 bags of seasoning, she really did not dare to accept it. Seeing this, Jinwan quickly reached out to press down Mo Jingshan's hand that was holding out the card. She quickly took out a 50 yuan bill from her bag and handed it to the dumbfounded lady boss. "Ahem, your change is 31 yuan and 80 cents. After the lady boss returned the money, her gaze could not help but shift from Jinwan back to Mo Jingshan. Even the lady boss's daughter by the side stared at them with an infatuated expression. The cold man was tall and slender. He had an aura that attracted attention, and it was hard to accurately describe his aura. It was cold and distant but could not be ignored. He's so rich, yet he actually personally bought these things. Seeing that they had left, the lady boss and her daughter softly muttered. Their words were filled with envy. Jinwan forcefully dragged Mo Jingshan out. Although she did not think much of it earlier, she felt that the way the lady boss's daughter stared at him was like a hungry wolf that had seen its prey. She really could not ignore it. She dragged a man who was much taller than her out just like that. Mo Jingshan held the little things he had just bought with one hand while his other hand remained in his trouser pocket. His long legs unhurriedly paced as he accompanied her home. Actually, Jinwan was also considering whether Mo Jingshan would be busy in the office in the afternoon. If he was very tired after work, she could cook noodles for him after returning home. In the end, the moment they entered, Mo Jingshan had her wait obediently. He tossed her a black trench coat, turned around and unbuttoned his exquisite and expensive shirt. He rolled up his high-quality sleeves and turned to enter the kitchen. Jinwan watched the man's silhouette that she could not shift her gaze away from. She subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This man, why was he always like this all the time? A feast for the eyes. The noodles she was looking forward to as well as the man cooking the noodles. For some strange reason, she recalled the scene last night when she was pressed down on the bed by him. That was the other side of Mo Jingshan. In bed, this man was definitely not as gentle and indifferent as he looked on the surface. Jinwan felt that she might not be able to remain calm. She stood in front of the door for a long time, blushed, and went straight into the bedroom. Sitting on the bed, she finally noticed that she was still holding onto Mo Jingshan's coat. She glanced outside and heard the sound of water boiling in the kitchen. She lowered her head and brought the black coat to her nose, smelling it. He sniffed again. It was as clean and refreshing as the morning air. She was not sure if Mo Jingshan had ever smoked before, but she did not remember seeing him smoke in front of her. There was a very, very faint smell of tobacco on his body. If she did not smell it carefully, she would not be able to tell. She did not know if he smoked when he was busy with work or if it was the smell of cigarettes in the company's conference room. But it smells good. In the kitchen. His phone rang. Mo Jingshan stirred the noodles in the water with one hand and took out his phone with the other. He then placed it by his ear. What's the matter? Nan Heng's seductive voice came coldly from the phone. This time the Zhou family and the Han family have suffered quite a blow. The Han family is basically crippled. Although the Zhou family has some background, they did not dare to act rashly due to propriety. With your woman's help, Han Tianyuan is currently squatting naked in the police station and being interrogated. He managed to obtain some information that you might be interested in. Tomorrow I'll have Shinmu bring it to you. Mo Jingshan calmly responded. Nan Heng could hear that his tone did not sound like he was resting or accompanying a woman on the bed. He casually asked, haven't you already returned to Aolan International? You haven't rested? It was yet another indifferent response. Nan Heng coldly sneered. The tip of his tongue pushed against the corner of his lips as he snorted. Are you busy in the study? Then I'll hang up first. You go do what you need to do. Mo Jingshan held the phone with one hand and placed a few seasonings into the boiling water with the other. His tone was calm. I'm cooking noodles. Nan Heng? He could. Damn it, he's really good. The great Mo Jingshan, who had just sent 2 large families into hell, did not even blink when he saw Zhou Yanyan's twitching lower body lying in the hospital with tears of blood in her eyes. In the blink of an eye, he returned home and actually started cooking noodles. Is it your woman who wants to eat noodles? No wonder Jinwan, that woman, is so stupid in front of you. She was indeed deceived by your appearance. Diske, you actually know how to cook noodles for a woman. Nan Heng coldly sneered. This old man has been your brother for so many years with Qin sighting, but I've never even drunk a cup of water that you personally served. How many bowls did you cook? Let's go over and freeload for a meal. I want to see if you've drugged her noodles with some bewitching soup. Otherwise, why would she suddenly be so devoted to you? There was no response from the phone. However, Nan Heng's hearing was extremely good. He heard the sound of Mo Jingshan breaking eggs. It was a very crisp sound. Nan Heng. This noodles is quite rich. There's even eggs. Mo Jingshan calmly asked, want to eat? Maybe in your next life. A voice without any warmth or giving any face rang from Mo Jingshan's side. Following that, the call was directly hung up. Nan Heng. 10 minutes later, the dinner that Jinwan had been looking forward to finally appeared on the dining table. She happily picked up her chopsticks and took a bite. She was really touched. Previously in the Yu Garden, she had insisted on showing off her skills in the kitchen. She thought that the noodles she cooked were extremely delicious and would definitely move Mo Jingshan's heart. In the end, Mo Jingshan was not moved at all. Now that she had eaten the noodles he cooked, her skills were really, completely not presentable. After eating half a bowl, she raised her eyes to look at the man who sat at the same table as her. Although he was eating the same food as her, he remained calm and elegant. Mo Jingshan raised his eyelids due to her gaze. He mildly curved his lips. Do I look more delicious than the noodles in your bowl? Jinwan swallowed a mouthful of noodles. She really wanted to answer yes. However, her rationality prevented her from speaking up. After all, last night the great COMO had a taste of meat. If she dared to casually flirt with him, she most likely would not be able to sleep tonight. As she ate, she softly and vaguely asked, today's incident at the bar in the east of the city, do you know about it? You hope that I don't know? The man's voice was low and mild. His voice was still pleasant and magnetic. However, she could still hear it. As expected. At that time she felt that it was slightly strange. Everything went so smoothly that it was inconceivable. Based on the situation at that time, shouldn't Han Tianyuan be in a state of panic and surrounded by enemies? If he wanted to drink, he would drink. No matter how he mingled, he would not be so foolish as to bring an ex-girlfriend with a history of drug addiction over. Chapter 63. So, that C-list celebrity was also arranged by you? When I arrived, were you already prepared to deal with Han Tianyuan? Jin-Wan had already grasped the situation tonight. You have to act quickly. After all, you can't give him a chance to retaliate. Otherwise, the one in danger will still be you, the man calmly stated. He did not plan on hiding this topic for too long. Jin-Wan lowered her head, slurping another mouthful of noodles. Since the incident tonight happened right under Mo Jingshan's eyes, then the reason why everything went smoothly was logical. If I had known that you were watching from the side, I wouldn't have worked so hard. Jin-Wan used her chopsticks to poke at the noodles. I hope that my sudden intervention didn't bring you any trouble. What trouble could there be? Jin-Wan supported her chin with one hand, looking at him. She suddenly smiled. That's right. I wanted to take the opportunity to teach that Han fellow a lesson. Otherwise, my heart would really be stifled. But since you were nearby, why didn't you come out to tell me? Mo Jingshan's gaze was as calm as the sea. Are you satisfied now? Jin-Wan stared at him and suddenly smiled. So, he was purposely giving her a chance to vent her anger, right? Jin-Wan pursed her lips, lowering her head to continue eating. However, she could not help but smile. The time was already approaching 10:30 p.m. Jin-Wan had eaten quite a bit and paced around the living room for a while to aid her digestion. Mo Jingshan was on the phone, so Jin-Wan did not disturb him. When she heard his footsteps approaching, she raised her eyes to look at him. That's right. Today, when I was organizing my things, I found that the door to the room beside your study couldn't be opened. Mo Jingshan's dark and calm eyes paused for a moment. His brows were especially deep. If you can't open it, just leave it there. The other rooms here are enough for you. Oh, that's true. Jin-Wan was tired from walking and sat down on the sofa. When Mo Jingshan approached, she was still thinking that the door lock did not seem to be broken. Instead, it seemed like it had been intentionally locked. But from yesterday until now, she had not seen Mo Jingshan stop by the door. It should have been locked a long time ago? She just wanted to ask. The man behind her suddenly circled her waist, handsome eyebrows and eyes suddenly close to her eyes, thin lips on her cheek, breath warm. Why didn't you wear that nightgown? She had been busy all night and had forgotten what she had promised in the afternoon. Jin-Wan coughed. She said nothing. He pretended not to hear anything. The man's voice was low and husky. Are you forcing me to kiss you? Jin-Wan turned to face him and was about to say that she had not even showered and was still wearing the clothes she wore during the day. However, as soon as she turned around, she was kissed by the man. From last night onwards, kissing was like the fuse for a certain X-rated action movie. Yesterday, even though she was the one who was drugged and couldn't help asking for more due to the drug, she was still stunned by Mo Jingshan's stamina. If it weren't for the drug's effect, she wouldn't have been able to get out of bed this morning because she was too sensitive last night. Otherwise, based on the situation last night, she reckoned that she would have been extremely sore today. Who said that it wouldn't hurt the second time? It was hard to not get used to this kind of thing. Besides, this man's stamina and cough, size, whatever, it was not something she could quickly adapt to. Jin-Wan's entire body softened from the kiss in his arms. She then thought that if they continued kissing in the middle of the night, it might cause the fire to spread. She quickly raised her hand to push against his chest. She could not push him away and was kissed even deeper. She was kissed until her entire body was numb and even her scalp was numb. After pushing for a long time, she gradually lost her strength. In the end, due to the difficulty in breathing, she weakly fell into the man's embrace. Her fingers subconsciously tightened around his clothes. In her daze, the man's hand reached into his clothes. Jin-Wan suddenly returned to herself and pushed against his chest. Last night. She wanted to ask if he could let her have a good night's sleep. Mo Jingshan really released her. Jin-Wan forcefully took 2 deep breaths, only to realize that her clothes were already disheveled as she was pressed against the sofa. She gathered her clothes. It seems like staying here has actually allowed you to touch me at any time. It's really my mistake. Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. He did not plan to give her any time to tidy up her clothes. He leaned over and pressed her back down. His gaze was so deep that it seemed as though he could swallow her up in an instant. His voice was low and husky, seductive. What do you mean? Jinwan's face was flushed. In the U garden, the sofa is on the first floor. You can't do anything because Auntie Chen and the helpers are all here. You can only do it in the bedroom? I haven't tried it. How do you know I can't? The man's voice was completely husky. Before his last word landed, he leaned down to kiss her again. Jinwan curled up under his body. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was trembling from the kiss. Her body was tense. She felt as though all of her senses were being pulled along with the entanglement between their lips. She was completely passive, but it also heated up from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. After kissing for a while, he gradually kissed her cheeks, the corner of her lips, her chin, and her cheeks. He then moved to the back of her ears. This man seemed to be very familiar with every part of her body. The moment Jinwan felt her ears being kissed, she felt as though her head was about to explode. She trembled violently. He chuckled softly, nibbling by her ears. Don't hold it in. Isn't it good to be like last night? Like last night? Jinwan's consciousness blurred as she recalled the scene when she was wrapped around his body like an octopus. Also, the way she cried and screamed was completely unlike her. She rushed to raise her hand, using it to cover her eyes from the man's fiery gaze. Her hands gripped his clothes tightly, but she tilted her head to avoid him. There's still time to rest after working. Last night we did it so many times. You should at least let me have a good sleep today. Don't kiss. The man's kiss landed by her ears once more. She instantly lost control of herself, and even her tone became much softer. Mo Jingshan was aware of her sensitivity. How could she be so sensitive? There were many sensitive places on her body. It was only because he usually let her off and did not tease her so much that she was able to avoid him for so long. He chuckled softly by her ears. If you don't kiss here, do you want to kiss somewhere else? Jinwan subconsciously moved her lips forward. She would rather be kissed until she was drunk than lose control when he kissed another place. In the end, the kiss did not land. The man directly lifted her clothes. Chapter 64. Jinwan's cheeks were red, and her long hair was scattered on the sofa. She was kissed by him until she was as charming as a puddle of water. Mo Jingshan watched her appearance and smiled as he kissed her ear. He chuckled hoarsely. Last night you begged me. Are you trying to destroy the bridge after crossing it? Jinwan glared at him angrily, lowering her head to bite his finger. Mo Jingshan's gaze darkened. Not only did he not pull his hand back, he took the opportunity when she could not bear to bite for too long to reach in. Are you sure you'll only bite this place tonight? Jinwan grabbed the pillow on the sofa and threw it harshly at his face. However, the man avoided it with a smile and pressed her against the sofa, unable to move. Pervert. I've never said that I'm a gentleman. I'm definitely not one in front of Mrs. Mo. He pinched her reddened face. He kissed her again. Jinwan recalled the word bite he had said earlier and decided to bite him. In the end, with this bite, the originally gentle and patient kiss turned into a torrential intimacy. It was even more oppressive. Wan. The man's voice was near her ear. Jinwan was already dizzy from his kiss. Even her initial resistance was weakening. When she heard him murmuring her name, she immediately raised her eyes to look at his deep gaze. Mo Jingshan softly bit her name and suddenly held one of her hands. While Jinwan was still in a daze, he pulled her hand down his body. Jinwan's face heated up. She hurriedly tried to withdraw her hand but was held down by the man. She could not struggle out of his grasp. Mo Jingshan, after you've tasted meat, you don't know how to control yourself anymore, do you? Move your hand away. Don't. The man's breath was hot. In the quiet night, she could only hear his sexy and low voice against the corner of her lips. Before this, I also thought that I had a clear heart and few desires. Did he mean that he did not plan on continuing to clear his heart and few desires? Jinwan's entire body trembled from his kiss on her neck. Could it be that before you got married, you didn't, with other women? Men all have normal physiological urges. Compared to other men, I'm more used to controlling myself. Then? Jinwan's voice became much hoarser. Then you should control yourself. Anyway, last night, I can't. He chuckled softly, kissing her ear. Jinwan glared at him. Why not? Didn't you just say that you're more restrained than other men? I'm still sore all over. Can't I rest for a night? Against you, Jinwan said. Jinwan, and was kissed again. At the same time, he let go of her hand. Just as she heaved a sigh of relief, her body was suddenly suspended in the air, and her whole body was carried horizontally. She subconsciously let out a low cry and raised her hands to grab his shoulders and arms. She was already dizzy from the kiss and was about to speak when the man lowered his head to block her lips. She could only whimper, "Nwanji and her. And Nwanji amo and Nwanshi as well. As she is amo as. Nwan. And she was still wearing the clothes she wore during the day. When she was carried into the bedroom and thrown onto the bed, most of her clothes had already been taken off. He kissed her chin, neck, and collarbone. Slowly he moved down. It was soft to the touch. She was not sure if it was because the air conditioner was turned on, but the temperature in the room was slightly high. She could feel his palms caressing her white waist muscles. She could not help but shiver. At this moment she was conscious. He was as well. She held onto his shoulders, feeling the heat from his body. She could not help but softly beg for mercy. Jing Shin, the man who firmly suppressed her, tightened even more because of her voice. His hands were already starting to probe her every inch, and they were about to break through her defense. Jinwan could not control herself in his arms. She whimpered, Don't. He kissed her again, sealing her soft cries. It was gentle and coaxing. He did not give her any chance to breathe. She heard him chuckle by her ear. Even if you cry, you can't stop. Under his gaze, Jinwan could not help but turn her head away. Her hands were still clasped tightly around his shoulders. She moved uneasily. Amo Jingshin, this man is really... She was almost crying. Her words were no longer coherent. She turned her face back, burying her head into his neck. Her entire body softened. His other hand landed on various parts of her body at the same time, bringing with it waves of heat and trembling. Jinwan was tortured to the point where all the nerves in her body were screaming. She felt that she was about to go crazy. She had been teased to this state. Right now, her situation was no different from last night. She wanted to directly press him down on the bed. Who asked him to purposely drag his feet and torture her? Earlier she kept saying that she wanted to rest. Right now he was clearly forcing her to beg him. Jinwan bit her lips, resisting the urge to make a sound. However, Mo Jingshin did not want to let her have it easy. He used kisses to force her lips open, prying open her teeth. Jinwan gradually could not hold back her soft moans. His fingers stopped. His slight movements brought with it a raging wave. Jinwan subconsciously wanted to avoid it, but it was impossible. When he finally stopped teasing her, he fiercely sank into the deepest part. Jinwan whimpered. She bit down on the man's shoulder. As expected, this man, Mo Jingshin, would always shatter her understanding of him in bed. His gentleness and calmness had disappeared. Instead, his desires grew stronger. There was no longer any trace of the so-called restraint and lack of desires. The bedsheets had just been changed this morning. After tonight, it was likely that they would have to be changed again. She gripped onto his arm tightly, completely losing control. Mo Jingshin narrowed his deep eyes, glancing at her with a hoarse laugh. He leaned down to whisper by her ear. Jinwan? Pervert. Mo Jingshin pinched her chin and kissed her under her expression that looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. In the end, her entire body seemed to be exhausted as she softly said, I haven't showered. Mo Jingshin's kiss landed on the back of her neck. He laughed hoarsely. I'll shower in a bit. A moment later, he carried her into the bathroom. In the end, she was squeezed by him for a long time in the bathroom. When Jinwan was carried back to the bedroom, the bedsheets had already been changed. It was easy to guess that he had returned to change them while she was in the shower. The moment she touched the bed, she immediately flipped over. She wanted to pull the blanket over herself, wanting to wrap herself up into a cocoon. Before she could fall asleep, she was pulled out of the blankets by the man who had just showered and smelled like her. He covered her up properly, lifted the blankets and came in, hugging her naked body into his arms. Jinwan did not dare to move in his embrace. She was afraid that she would accidentally tease him again. She obediently buried her face in his embrace, determined not to move. Chapter 65. The morning light was quiet. Jinwan had been bullied badly last night and slept very soundly. She thought that Mo Jingshin would have already left for the company, so she opened her eyes and got up. However, before she could move, she was suddenly pressed back by an arm from behind. Her back was pressed against a chest that was just as naked as hers. She was startled and turned to look at the man lying by her side. His perfect face was so handsome under the morning light that it made one suspect that he was the only flawless product created by God. Although he had just woken up, his black eyes were as clear as water. After being oppressed for an entire night, she was really a little afraid of him. She subconsciously twisted her body to avoid him, but he pressed her down on the bed and she could not get up. "Why are you awake?" The man's voice carried a light and hoarse tone. "It's almost 9 o'clock. Why didn't you go to work? The senior management meeting starts at 10. This place is close to the company, so I'll sleep with you for 2 more hours. There's no rush." Jinwan felt that she had led this usually strict man astray. Mo Jingshan was actually sleeping in with her during the workday. However, this could not be considered sleeping in. Last night, not only did she almost lose her voice, but she was also so tired that she suspected she would not be able to leave the house for 2 days. She turned her head and saw that the man's black hair was slightly messy. He did not look like the COMO who was usually dressed in a shirt and trousers that no one dared to approach. He was so real and intimate that her heart pounded harshly. "Not going to continue sleeping?" he asked. Jinwan wanted to say that the man seemed more dangerous in the morning, but seeing that Mo Jingshan seemed to really intend to sleep with her under the blanket, she did not get up. Right now her entire body was sore. It would be good to sleep a little longer. She glanced to the side and saw that the man's shoulders and back were covered with various scratches. Cough, of course these were all from her. She retracted her gaze, but from the corner of her eyes she couldn't help but look at the man's calm and handsome face when he closed his eyes again. He didn't look like the man who had bullied her for the entire night last night at all. Unknowingly she fell asleep in his arms again. However, this time after sleeping for less than an hour, she abruptly opened her eyes. Her hand touched the bedside. There was still the scent of Mo Jingshan's body, but he was not there. Jinwan opened her eyes and turned over. As though smelling something nice, she glanced toward the door of the bedroom. If, in the future, he could personally cook for her the next morning to reward her body and her stomach after being oppressed by him like this for an entire night, she didn't mind training more in the future for the sake of Boss Mo's personal cooking. Otherwise, she would be tormented by him until her bones were about to fall apart. Jinwan was attracted by the fragrance of the food and could no longer lie down. She abruptly sat up, pushed aside the blankets and got off the bed. She was about to head to the closet to find the clothes she had bought yesterday to wear. In the end, as soon as he stood on the ground, he fell back onto the bed. His legs were so weak that he couldn't even stand up. She fell onto the bed and remained silent for a few seconds before gritting her teeth and standing up. She forced herself to open the wardrobe. She had just taken out a set of clothes and was about to return to the bed when her legs began to ache unbearably. She fell to the side and rushed to support herself against the wardrobe door when Mo Jingshan, who had abruptly entered the bedroom, caught her with one hand and pressed her, who was still naked, into his embrace. "How can you fall in the bedroom?" "Fall." Her legs were clearly weak and she couldn't stand properly. "All right." Jinwan threw the clothes in her hands at him. "I've been squeezed dry by you. If this continues, I won't even be able to step out of the door." Mo Jingshan saw her flushed face and resentful expression. He chuckled softly. "No strength? Do you still have the strength to eat breakfast?" Jinwan turned her head away from him. He clearly saw how she had fallen earlier, yet he was still teasing her. This was the first time she had discovered the viciousness hidden in this man's bones. She was angered to death. Although she had turned her head away, her hands snatched the clothes back from his hands. She turned her head and put on a long loose home dress. Mo Jingshan saw her slightly puffed up cheeks and chuckled. Then Jinwan was abruptly lifted up by his waist. She turned around with a guarded expression. "What are you doing? Aren't you weak?" "I'll carry you to eat," he said concisely. By the time he finished speaking, he had already carried her out of the bedroom. The dining table was bathed in sunlight. It was not until Mo Jingshan sat down with her in his arms, put her on his lap, and fed her a glass of warm milk that she came back to herself. Flattered, she rushed to get out of his arms. Help! Mo Jingshan was trying to take her life, wasn't he? Her little heart really couldn't take it. Before she could move away from his embrace, Mo Jingshan pressed down on her. "You don't even have the strength to drink milk?" Jinwan understood and rushed to snatch the glass from his hands. She drank a large gulp and then pointed at her own mouth, indicating that she could drink it. "I'll eat it myself, eat it myself." Earlier she had wanted to act coquettishly, but Mo Jingshan was really black-bellied. Yesterday's breakfast was Chinese. Although today's breakfast was simple, it could still be considered Western. After being served so well by Boss Missouri, Jinwan suddenly felt that she did not want to return to the U Garden. What to do? Seeing that Jinwan wanted to stay here permanently, Mo Jingshan arranged for the people from the U Garden to move some of her things over. He also sent Auntie Chin over to help her tidy up, but Jinwan ultimately asked Auntie Chin to return. Subconsciously, she still hoped that this would be a quiet home that belonged only to her and Mo Jingshan. There was no need for servants, nor did she need Auntie Chen's help for everything. After all, she was no longer the Ji family's young miss. 10 years had already transformed Jin Wan into someone who could stand on her own. At around 11 o'clock, she was in the study organizing the laptop she had just brought over. She wanted to check on the latest information related to property in the country. Furthermore, the company had recently changed its boss and was undergoing a personnel reorganization. She could use this time to familiarize herself with the internal and external matters. She had just turned on the laptop when the phone placed on the study table suddenly rang. Jin Wan saw that it was an unfamiliar number and reached out to pick it up. Looking at the information she had copied from the company a few days ago, she casually said, "Hello, who is it? Yesterday you came to our hospital and left in a hurry. I didn't have the time to give you the analysis results of that bottle of medicine. Miss Ji, when do you have time?" Qin Sighting's voice carried a hint of laziness and coldness. "The results are out so quickly? Since Miss Ji has given instructions, how could this Qin dare to neglect it?" Qin Sighting's voice was mild. There seemed to be a hint of a smile, but it gave off a faint sense of alienation and indifference. "You said that your father has been taking this medicine recently?" "That's right. Is there a problem with this medicine?" The other side was silent for a moment. "We'll talk about it when you come to collect the results. Dr. Qin, if it's convenient for you, I'll go now." Jin Wan stood up, turning to change her clothes and leave. Chapter 66. Right now it was already the doctor's lunch break. After Jin Wan arrived, she called Qin Sighting to ask if it was convenient for him before taking the elevator upstairs. When she arrived outside the consultation room, Jin Wan thought there would be no one lining up at this time. However, she saw a young girl blocking the door. She was dressed in all kinds of luxury brands, and her hair was exquisitely styled. The diamonds on her nails were almost blinding. "Who are you? What are you doing in the consultation room at this time? Don't you know Dr. Qin is on his lunch break?" The young girl glanced at Jin Wan with disdain. Jin Wan glanced at her indifferently and ignored her. She was about to knock on the door. However, the girl suddenly reached out and slapped Jin Wan's hand down. "Dr. Qin is on duty today. I thought I was the only one who knew he would be in the hospital all day. It wasn't easy for me to find an opportunity to come here and guard him. Since you're also here to block him, then let's make things clear." "Jin Wan?" Her face was filled with question marks. "As for me, I'll say the ugly words first. No matter whose backdoor you used to know he'll be in the hospital today, don't try to snatch Dr. Qin from me." The girl mockingly glanced at Jin Wan, who was slightly confused. She reached out to stroke her exquisite hair, the Bulgari diamond watch on her wrist sparkling. "I've been chasing this Dr. Qin for more than a year. He's about to agree to go on a date with me. This man is mine, understand?" Jin Wan was speechless. Did this nouveau riche girl in front of him misunderstand something? Jin Wan calmly said, "I'm sorry, I have something to discuss with Dr. Qin." When the girl heard the last few words, she immediately blocked the door, blocking it tightly. Her eyes were filled with caution. "Discuss something? What did you come to the hospital to discuss? If you're not here to see a doctor, then you're definitely here to harass Dr. Qin. Go away, go away. This has nothing to do with you." Jin Wan silently raised her brows. Who on earth was harassing Dr. Qin? "I advise you to give up. Dr. Qin is the young master of the Qin Group. A woman like you who has no money and wears counterfeit goods is not good enough for him. If you get kicked out, you'll be the only one who will be embarrassed. What's more, I really don't want to nag at you, but that pair of police shoes of yours is the only thing worth a bit of money. Anything I wear on a regular basis is more expensive than your shoes. I advise you to give up." As the girl spoke, she glanced at Jin Wan disdainfully from head to toe, barely estimating that Jin Wan's status was not high. Jin Wan didn't want to argue with a little girl she didn't know, nor did she take her seriously. Right now, she was in a hurry to get the analysis results of her father's medicine. Being blocked like this, she was still a little unhappy. They had always known that Qin Sighting had no lack of suitors, but they did not expect there to be such a weirdo. She glanced expressionlessly at the girl's smug expression. "Apart from LV, Armani, Bulgari, and branded shoes that cost thousands of dollars, what else do you know?" The girl sneered. "Why do you care what I know? In any case, I can afford it." As she spoke, she glanced at Jin Wan from head to toe again. She saw that Jin Wan's clothes did not have any brand logos, but they seemed to be from a big brand. She firmly believed that what she was wearing was some international imitation. All of a sudden, the door to the consultation room opened. The moment Qin Siding's figure appeared, the girl turned her eyes agitatedly. She had a love-struck expression, as though she could not wait to pounce on him. Qin Siding appeared to be smiling, but his voice was cold. In this Hai Cheng, a woman who dares to compete with Miss Ji in terms of wealth, how blind are they? The girl's eyes trembled. She sensed that Dr. Qin and the others should know each other. Her expression immediately grew alarmed. What Miss Ji? Which Miss Ji? How would I know which slum she came from, Miss Ji? Qin Siding calmly glanced at Jin Wan, calmly saying, which other Miss Ji could it be that requires me to personally welcome her? The girl's gaze was dazed as though she had yet to react. Do you know Diamond Forever? Qin Siding's gaze landed on the bag in Jin Wan's hands. He was indifferent as usual, unwilling to even glance at the girl by the side. Or rather, after he opened the door, he really did not even glance at her. Diamond Forever, what is that? The moment the girl heard the English words, her head swelled. Her pronunciation was awkward as she asked. Qin Siding coldly smiled. This bag of hers is enough to buy your entire cloakroom. Ah, don't joke around. My cloakroom is very expensive. If you add up all the clothes without at least 1,000,000 or 800,000 yuan, you really can't compare to me. Qin Siding appeared as though he did not hear her words. He only glanced at Jin Wan, who had been standing there silently. He turned to the side and opened up a path indicating for her to enter. He didn't plan to waste any more time talking to people who were unrelated to him. Jin Wan politely nodded at him and directly entered. Seeing that Qin Siding was not looking at her and that he seemed to be about to close the door, the girl hurriedly leaned against the door to stop him from closing it. Her eyes were fixed on him. Dr. Qin, I like you. From the first time I saw you, I liked you. A year ago when I was hospitalized, you said we weren't close, but now I've been chasing after you for a whole 14 months. We should be very familiar with each other now, right? Can you give me a chance? Even if it's just to try dating first. I really like you. I love you. Had she accidentally stumbled upon a confession scene? Jin Wan turned back to take a look. She stood in the consultation room and quietly took a step to the side. She tried her best to act as though this matter did not concern her and quietly watched the show. Following the girl's expectant and anxious gaze, her gaze landed on the man standing coldly in front of the white door. The doctor's white robe he wore was clean and spotless. His brows were indifferent, and his thin lips seemed to be carrying a slight smile. Although he was clearly smiling, it appeared as though he did not place the other party in his eyes at all. His frivolous smile appeared even colder. At this time, it was the hospital staff's lunch break. Some doctors and nurses were passing by in the hallway. When they heard the commotion, their gazes all simultaneously turned in this direction. The man was cold and indifferent. When he turned around, his slender legs paced with indifference. As though he had not heard anything, he returned to the consultation room. Chapter 67. Qin Siding single-handedly retrieved the stethoscope from the pocket of his white coat and tossed it onto the medical equipment rack by the side. He glanced back and lazily lifted his eyelids. His thin lips curved into an indifferent smile. I don't like you. Let alone 14 months, even if you wait for 14 years in front of my hospital, I still won't like you. The girl's gaze immediately dimmed. Her earlier arrogance and confidence also crumbled. She bit her lips unwillingly, her eyes reddening. Last year I almost died. It was you who saved my life. When I was pushed into the operating room, didn't you say that you liked obedient and well-behaved girls? That's why I've always listened to you. When I was discharged, you said that you don't like girls who cry, so I didn't cry. Why don't you like me? I've worked so hard to become the way you like me. In the operating room, to stabilize the patient's emotions, any gentle words are equivalent to half an anesthetic. Qin Siding's tone was cold. He did not even glance at the other party's hurt expression. His tone was cold and unhurried. I've saved many women from the gates of hell. From 80-year-old women to 1-year-old baby girls who have just learned how to speak, every single one of them knows how to be quiet and obedient. I treat all of my patients equally. Could it be that I like all of them? The girl's earlier domineering attitude changed. Her eyes reddened and she bit her lips as though she was about to cry. Jin Wan silently thought that a person like Qin Siding was indeed not someone that any woman could hold on to. When he was warm, he was a smiling fox. When he was cold to the bones. She could not understand him at all. She really could not understand. Mo Jingshan and Qin Siding were both cold, noble, and unapproachable. How could two people who were so easily awkward become best friends? The girl held back her tears. I am different from them. You said that you don't like yes-men girls, so I worked hard to change myself. I know that your family background is illustrious, and not just any woman can match up to you. Although my family isn't considered wealthy, we still have business dealings with the Qin Corporation. I thought that we could. The doctors and nurses who were watching outside the door all had different expressions. Some were sympathetic, some were contemptuous, and some didn't take it as big news at all. After all, Dr. Qin had been chased to the hospital by all kinds of girls. It was not a matter of a day or two. Ignoring the various gazes around him, Qin Siding was finally willing to give the girl a look, but it was cold and silent. It's been so long and you've been rejected by me countless times. Can't you see the truth? I don't like you. No matter what you become, I won't like you. His voice was cold and heartless. There was no warmth in it, nor was there any sympathy. The girl bit her lips, her heart instantly freezing into an ice cave. She finally understood. Last year when she was here, she was his patient and he was her attending doctor. He could be responsible for her health, and he could smile gently and soothe her nervousness and fear. Apart from being a doctor and a patient, there was nothing between them. For so long she had been blocked outside the door so many times. She had never had the chance to get close to him. Finally, I almost got to walk into his consultation room today, but before she walked in she finally received the most heartless answer. Then do you like her? You let her into your consultation room. Is it because you like her? The girl suddenly pointed at Jinwan who was standing inside. Jinwan was instantly frightened. Hey, she wasn't going to take the blame for this. She had never been familiar with Qin Siding, not even in her previous life. She wasn't even clear about Qin Siding's personal feelings. They were people from two completely different worlds. Was this person in front of her provoked? She dared to say anything? Allowing her into his consultation room during lunchtime meant that he liked her? Did she think Qin Siding was crazy or a love saint? As a doctor, he definitely wouldn't be so senseless. Dr. Qin, if you like her style, I can also change myself into her style. I really like you. Qin Siding had completely lost his patience. He raised his long arm and directly closed the door, blocking the girl outside. Excuse me. He calmly glanced at Jinwan who was still standing in the consultation room. Jinwan raised her brows and only smiled. She teased, "Are all the girls who come to the hospital to chase after you like this?" Qin Siding did not speak more. He directly walked to the desk, pulled open the drawer, and handed her an A4-sized paper bag. Seeing that he did not mention it, Jinwan did not ask any more. She did not take the matter that had nothing to do with her seriously. She walked over and reached out to receive it. The contents of this medicine. The medicine you gave me, after being analyzed by a few pharmaceutical experts I have a good relationship with, they don't contain any harmful ingredients. Qin Siding's hand reached into his trouser pocket, calmly saying, "If you have the opportunity to obtain the medicine he took at the same time, send it over. I'll check the contents of the other medicines before making a conclusion." Jinwan's heart had just relaxed when she instantly heard something else. You mean? Qin Siding raised his brows. If this medicine is taken alone, it can only be considered a medicine that soothes the intestines and clears internal heat. However, it is also very special. If it is mixed with other medicines that are incompatible with it, it will have the opposite effect and cause chronic organ failure. Currently there are no other medicines here. Without the final analysis, everything can only be guessed. When Jinwan walked out of the hospital, she suddenly felt a gaze on her. She turned to see the girl who had failed in her confession earlier. Her mascara was smeared all over her face as she sat on the bench outside the hospital. Her expression was filled with shock as she stared at the bag in her hands. Seeing her gaze, Jinwan knew exactly what she was shocked about. She did not pay any more attention to this small incident and turned to leave. In truth, she had not carried this bag for a long time. Previously, when she fell into the water, her previous bag was soaked to the point where it could no longer be used. When she left in a hurry, Auntie Chen helped her find this bag and Jinwan continued to use it. The girl sat on the bench, holding onto her phone as she stared at Jinwan's departing figure. She stared blankly for a long time before lowering her head in disbelief at the image of Diamond Forever that she had just found on Baidu. The so-called Diamond Forever was Chanel's classic handbag. Adorned with 334 small diamonds, it was the epitome of luxury and low profile. There were only 13 of them in the entire world, and it was the pinnacle of limited edition handbags. 2 years ago, the 14th Diamond Forever was born. It was rumored to be a gift from Hai Cheng's Ji family's eldest miss on her 18th birthday. Her father, Ji Hongwen, had given it to her. Chanel had specially customized a diamond forever for Miss Ji as a coming-of-age gift. This matter had been discussed for a long time in the upper-class fashion circle. Thus, that bag could not only buy her entire cloakroom, it was worth 1.59 million yuan. Chapter 68. Aolan International was not far from here, and it was only a few minutes' walk back. In the morning, Mo Jingshan had personally treated her stomach. Now that she invited her husband out for lunch, it was a form of reciprocation. However, she did not know if he was busy at this time. When she reached the top floor of the company, she stepped out of the elevator and did not expect to see Mo Jingshan walking out of his office. Their gazes directly met. His tall and slender body formed a long shadow on the floor in front of the office. He was handsome, and his dark gray shirt wrapped around his slender upper body. His collar was unbuttoned, and there was a small piece of black gauze covering his collarbone. His skin tone was just right, and the man's face was noble and cold, gentle and calm. The moment he saw Jin Wan, Mo Jingshan unhurriedly raised his handsome brows. His cold and indifferent eyes were mixed with a hint of gentleness, and his lips curved slightly. It was a faint smile. It had only been 2 hours since they last saw each other. Why was it that when she saw his slight smile, her heart wanted to jump out? Could it be that when she saw Qin Siding's warm appearance in the hospital, she was frostbitten as a bystander? Now that she saw Mo Jingshan, she wanted to rush over to warm up? Jinwan walked over. Just as she was about to speak, Mo Jingshan shifted his gaze away. He spoke to the woman dressed in a white collar suit by his side. The plan will be as we discussed earlier. If there are any problems, contact me. The woman by his side smiled elegantly. All right, CMO. After speaking, the woman walked toward the elevator. When she passed by Jinwan, she politely smiled at her. Jinwan knew that there was no shortage of men or women in all the departments of Mo Corporation, so it was not strange to see such an attractive woman in his company, but she still couldn't help turning her head to take another look at her. This woman had a very unique temperament. She was more confident and beautiful. She was around 22 or 23 years old, and when she walked by, there was a light fragrance. It was the scent of a high-end yet low-profile French perfume. It was very tasteful. What attracted Jin Wan's attention was this woman's identity. Secretary, CEO's secretary. The elevator door opened and closed. Jin Wan originally wanted to invite the great CEO Mo for lunch, but the words that came out of her mouth were, "Wasn't your secretary's position empty a while ago? When did you get a new secretary? I didn't hear about it." As soon as she finished speaking, Mo Jingshan had already turned to open the office door behind him. He naturally pulled Jin Wan closer to him and let her in. "A few days ago, when I was not in the country, I transferred a secretary from Shine Group in the US. The positions of the company's executives and senior secretaries will not be vacant for too long, so it is not surprising that the Mo family directly transferred someone from Shine." Jin Wan was silent for a moment and did not speak immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked in a low voice with a warm expression. "Nothing, I was just casually asking. After all, I suddenly found out that a very beautiful and outstanding woman had appeared by my husband's side. I can't just pretend that I didn't see it." Mo Jingshan watched her meaningfully. "Are you jealous?" "No, absolutely not." He chuckled and pinched her face. "Mrs. Mo is the most beautiful woman in Haicheng. Now you're standing here praising another woman's beauty. Are you jealous?" Jin Wan frowned. He could even see through this. It was clearly just a work relationship, but earlier, when the secretary smiled at her, she felt strangely uncomfortable. "You're the boss and she's the subordinate. I was just casually saying." Jin Wan was stubborn. She turned to escape from his embrace. Mo Jingshan did not allow her to move away. He brought her to the back of the office table and carried her to sit on his lap. His hand patted her waist from time to time, and his lips carried an indistinct smile. No matter how she looked at it, it seemed like he was using his gaze to tease her, whose entire body was filled with jealousy. "Why did you come to the company at this time? Why didn't you rest more at home?" His voice was clear, and his calm tone became much gentler under this warm embrace. "I just went to Dr. Qin to retrieve the drug test results and passed by here on my way back. I wanted to treat the great CEO Mo to a hot pot." Jin Wan explained her intentions, purposely ignoring the fact that he wanted her to rest more at home. Although her legs were indeed weak when she woke up in the morning, it was not to the extent that she would not be able to leave the house after a few hours of rest. It was just that she had been suppressed by him for too long last night and was easily fatigued today. What's the result? The medicine that I sent didn't show any abnormalities, but it can't be completely conclusive. When I pass by the G home, I'll find a chance to check for other medicines. As Jinwan spoke, she glanced at the time. Her eyelids rose, and her voice carried a hint of jealousy. Have you eaten lunch? Do you want to give me some face and accompany me to eat hot pot? Mo Jingshan rubbed her head, messing up her hair. He softly said with a smile that was not a smile, your gaze is filled with displeasure. If I don't give you this face, won't I not even be able to sleep on the bed tonight? Even if you give me this face, you're still not allowed to sleep with me tonight. Jinwan pretended to be slightly angry. Is there even a day for me to rest? I haven't had a good night's sleep for 2 days. Seeing her reproachful expression, Mo Jingshan's heart moved. He held the back of her head and lowered his head to kiss her. It was only a kiss that stopped halfway, but Jinwan almost jumped up in his embrace. She rushed to pull back, and when he kissed her again, she softly said, "This is your office." Office so what? He seemed to be purposely provoking her. When Jinwan glared at him, he still kissed her twice on the lips. Seeing her angry expression, he continued kissing her. Earlier on, Jinwan had heard the sounds of people passing by the door. Even though the CEO's office was located on the top floor of the MO Corporation, and the secretary's office and assistant's office were on the lower floor, it was inevitable that employees would come to the top floor. This was a public area. She tensed her body. As his kiss deepened, she suddenly opened her mouth and bit down. Mo Jingshan's black eyes watched her sensitive and embarrassed expression. He smiled by her lips, caressing the long hair behind her head. He warmly whispered by her lips, "Do you know, when you're shy, it's even harder for a man to control himself." Jinwan's lips were pressed against his. She glared at him. "What I said last night was right. After you started eating, you really don't know how to control yourself. If I didn't know how to control myself, do you think you would have the ability to leave today?" Chapter 69. Jinwan pushed against his chest with both hands. When she heard someone passing by the door, she softly changed the topic. "I saw that there's a newly opened hot pot restaurant downstairs. There are a few nearby as well. Can you eat spicy food?" Mo Jingshan released her. When Jinwan stood up from his embrace, his hand remained on her waist. He did not let her walk too far away and kept her by his side. "My preferences for food are very simple. I'm not picky." Jinwan originally wanted to challenge the newly opened hot pot restaurant with Mo Jingshan. However, after considering her stomach, she gave up. "Then let's eat the traditional charcoal hot pot. I'm not sure if there will be many people at this time. I'll make a call to reserve a place." She picked up her phone and was about to check the number of the hot pot restaurant near the company. Her finger had just tapped on the screen when the internal line on the office table suddenly rang. Mo Jingshan casually pressed it. Shen Mu's voice came through the phone. "CO Mo, the elder is here." Mo Jingshan did not expect his grandfather to suddenly come here. After a moment of silence, he calmly asked, "He's already up?" "Yes, the elevator should be reaching the top floor soon." The internal line was hung up. Mo Jingshan turned to see that Jinwan, who was about to make a reservation earlier, suddenly ran to the side. She circled behind the black leather sofa in the office and then behind the desk. "What are you doing?" "Grandfather Mo is here. I haven't seen him for so long. If he sees that I'm disturbing your work in your office, he will definitely be unhappy. It's going to be his birthday soon. Before that, I'd better not leave a bad impression on him." Jinwan looked around as she spoke. "I have to find a place to hide." Mo Jingshan sighed with a smile. There was a trace of playfulness in his eyes. "When he sees you, he can't be happier. How could he be unhappy? How could Jinwan listen to him?" She heard movement outside the door. It sounded like there was a walking stick walking on the ground, approaching. Her gaze shifted to the wide office desk in front of Mo Jingshan. She subconsciously rushed over and hid under the desk under Mo Jingshan's eyes. Mo Jingshan saw the way she crouched down and his gaze darkened. The door opened. Although the Mo family had been prosperous for generations, Elder Mo had joined the army when he was young and had the experience of resisting the United States and aiding Korea. With his military rank, even after he retired from the business world, he still had a domineering temper. In his grandson's company, he did not need anyone to lead the way. When they reached the office, he did not even make a sound and directly pushed the door open. The moment the door opened, Jinwan raised her hand and made a shu gesture to him. "Mo Jingshan, I just came over and heard from Shinmu that Jinwan was here. Why don't I see her? Grandfather Mo's voice was old but dignified as he walked in. Separated by the office desk, his voice came closer and closer. Jinwan rubbed her forehead. She didn't notice Shinmu when she arrived. As the CEO's assistant, Shinmu had never been a blabbermouth. When did he find out that she was here? He actually told Grandfather Mo directly. Now that she had already hidden herself, if she were to come out again, the situation would be too awkward. Jinwan hesitated for a moment. She shrunk under the office desk and did not move. She raised her eyes and looked at Mo Jingshan with a pleading expression. She then clasped her hands together and stared at him. Mo Jingshan glanced at the woman under the office desk. The corners of his lips lifted faintly. She just came. She has already left. Mo Jingshan lied so calmly that even Jinwan could not help but want to give him a thumbs up. After all, she was currently squatting in front of him. In such a situation he could still maintain his composure as though she did not exist. If it were her, she would definitely be so embarrassed that she would not be able to maintain her composure. At the very least, she would not be able to maintain her inner peace. This G-brat, she came quickly and left quickly. Elder Mo harumphed, leaning on his walking stick as he approached the office desk. This weekend, bring Jinwan back to the Mo family? This weekend was Elder Mo's 80th birthday. It was clear that the elder had not seen his granddaughter-in-law for a long time and was worried that he would not be able to see her during the birthday celebration. Thus, he directly came to check on the situation. Mo Jingshan smiled faintly. For the past half a year, you've been keeping an eye on the Yu Garden's movements. Although you don't know our situation like the back of your hand, you should know that our relationship as husband and wife is no longer as distant as before. Of course, she will be there for your birthday celebration. Hearing Mo Jingshan's words, Elder Mo appeared to have swallowed a tranquilizer. He nodded. All right. That's good. In the blink of an eye, Elder Mo raised his brows and reprimanded, What do you mean by I've been keeping an eye on the Yu Garden's movements? Xiaoqin saw that the two of you are so close. It's only right for her to report to me. After being married for so long, I haven't seen any movements from the Ji family's brat's stomach. I'm an 80-year-old man and even in my dreams, I want to hug a great-grandchild. You brat, you completely don't understand the feelings of someone with half a foot in the grave. Jinwan silently scolded. No wonder Auntie Chen was so concerned about their relationship. It turned out that Elder Mo had placed her as a spy. Thankfully, Auntie Chen was Grandfather Mo's person. If it were some other spy with unclear motives, Mo Jingshan most likely would not have allowed her to stay in the Yu Garden for so long. Mo Jingshan only coldly glanced at Elder Mo. He casually played with the fountain pen on the office desk. The tip of the pen paused on the table as he opened his mouth. His tone was extremely mild. 80 years old, and you can still use your walking stick to chase after thieves all over the world. I think you won't be able to enter the grave even after another 20 years. Mentioning his achievement of catching a thief on the street 2 months ago, Elder Mo's bright and spirited eyes were filled with pride. That's right, if you don't hurry up and give me a great-grandchild if I'm not around in 20 years, how are you going to find a wife for my great-grandchild? Jinwan, who was under the office desk. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at him. Elder Mo placed both his hands on his walking stick, his brows dancing as he said, Great-granddaughter is fine too. It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl. Anyway, you brat, at the very least you have to give me 2 and 3 years and 3 and 5 years. The more the better. Mo Jingshan smiled faintly. His gaze meaningfully glanced at the people under the table. Jinwan raised her hand to cover one side of her eyes. She could not tell if she was crying or laughing. Did Grandfather Mo intend for her to give birth to a football team? And 3 and 5 years? The elder seemed to have reached the climax of his speech and did not seem to have any intention of ending the topic. Jinwan took out her phone to look at the time. It was already 1 o'clock. Lunch break had already passed. She did not know if she could still eat this hot pot. Recently, there have been quite a number of relatives rushing over to the Mo family. Why do you have the free time to go out? Mo Jingshan casually asked. Elder Mo snorted. Relatives? Which one of them wasn't a distant relative who was thick-skinned enough to insist on being related to the Mo family? This old man's birthday celebration is just for fun, so I let them be. My old comrade is passing by Haiqing today and invited me for tea. I'm just taking the chance to walk around and enjoy some peace. There was a knock on the office door. Mo Jingshan calmly said, Come in. Jinwan could not tell who it was from under the table, but she vaguely heard the sound of high heels landing on the floor. COMO, the documents for this morning's meeting have been prepared. There's also the finance department's monthly report. They've sent it to the secretary's office. I brought it over. This voice was gentle and sweet, gentle and calm. Chapter 70. Elder Mo's voice paused at the same time. His voice changed direction as though he was looking back at the person who had just entered. You are in Shuyan? Elder Mo asked. Secretary politely and respectfully nodded toward Elder. Hello, Grandfather Mo. It's been a few years since we last met. You seem to be in good health. Elder Mo smiled and nodded. The last time I saw you, was it in America? 2 days ago, I heard that you had returned to the country. I didn't expect it to be true. Are your father and grandfather well? Secretarian smiled. They are all well, but my grandfather is not as healthy as you. You don't look like you're 80 years old. If you say you're 60 years old, many people will believe you. Aha, this child still knows how to talk. AI, this granddaughter of the In family has already grown up. Time really doesn't wait. Elder Mo enjoyed these words very much. He was in a good mood as he smiled. You've been working in America's Shine for more than a year. I heard that you've always done well in your work. You handle things strictly and decisively. You're also a Harvard graduate. Why did your Uncle Mo suddenly transfer you back to the country? And you even entered Jingshin's company? Secretarian maintained an appropriate smile. This is Uncle Mo's intention. Although Mo Corporation is not part of the Mo family's company system, it is still the most influential company in the country. Anywhere is a good training. Since Uncle Mo wants me to return, I'll directly come over. Oh? Your Uncle Mo's intention? Elder Mo's tone suddenly became lighter. There was a slight pause. Secretarian nodded. When I came to the company to report, CO Mo was in England on a business trip. Uncle Mo arranged for me to come in, so I was able to skip a few procedures with the HR department. I only had the chance to meet CEO Mo yesterday afternoon. Jean Wan could hear that this new secretary named In Shuyan seemed to be very familiar with the Mo family. Their relationship was not bad. But she said she was sent back by Uncle Mo. Uncle Mo? Which Uncle Mo could there be in Shine Group? Mo Jingshin's parents had not been in the country for many years. Shine Group had always been managed by Mo Jingshin's father Mo Xiaoza. Half a year ago when they got married, only Mo Jingshin's mother had specially flown back to personally visit this daughter-in-law. Mo Xiaoza had not even met her face. Hence, the Uncle Mo that Secretarian was referring to, and the Uncle Mo that she was so familiar with should be Mo Xiaoza. To specially send the daughter of a family friend back to the country and to Mo Jingshin's side, wasn't the meaning of this too obvious? Jean Wan raised her eyes to look at Mo Jingshin, who had been quietly sitting behind the desk without interrupting. Sensing Jean Wan's fiery gaze, Mo Jingshin's gaze subtly shifted to the bottom of the table. His brows were deep and calm. It was impossible to tell what thoughts and plans he had for this secretary who was forced into his position. When they first got married, Grandfather Mo was the one who insisted on Jean Wan marrying into his family. He was also the one who doted on and protected Jean Wan the most in the Mo family, but Mo Jingshin's father never showed up. She didn't know if he was too busy at Shine or had other thoughts. Now, with a woman's keen perception, she realized that Mo Jingshin's father had never acknowledged her as his daughter-in-law. Elder Mo chatted with Secretarian for a while longer, but Jean Wan did not hear much of what they talked about. She kept looking at Mo Jingshin from the bottom of the table. Mo Jingshin only listened to their conversation, his expression indifferent and not saying a single word. Finally, Secretarian took her leave because she still had work to do. Elder Mo stood in the office quietly before suddenly asking, Jingshin, what do you think? Mo Jingshin coldly curved his lips. What do you mean, what do you mean? Your father is intentionally going against me. He clearly knows that Jean Wan has already married into our family for so long, yet he still refuses to give up and insists on marrying this lass in Shuyan to you. Elder Mo's tone was slightly displeased. Right now he even brazenly sent her over from America. It's clear that he doesn't have any regard for the granddaughter-in-law I've set my eyes on. Although this lass from the In family isn't bad and I've seen her a few times when she was young, you've always had no interest in this in Shuyan. You're neither cold nor indifferent, so I've never planned on forcing you on this matter. Elder Mo sighed. I hope that lass Jean Wan doesn't know about this. Otherwise, if she thinks too much, I might not be able to hold my great-grandson in a short period of time. Mo Jingshin's brows moved. He gave a light, meaningful smile. He was sitting right under the table. How could he not know? Jean Wan, she was indeed thinking about it, but she was not thinking about the negative aspects. It was just a secretary sent over from America. It wasn't like she was sent to Mo Jingshan's bed. Even if she was sent to his bed, it was uncertain if he would even be willing to sleep with her. What was there for her to think about? I have to go back and give your father a call. He must be getting old and thinks that his wings have hardened. He can even disregard the granddaughter-in-law I've set my eyes on. I have to scold him properly. Elder Mo walked out with his walking stick. He did not even turn his head back in anger. Mo Jingshan did not stop him. He curved his lips. The moment the office regained its silence, he glanced at the little woman who slowly crawled out from under the table. How's the air down there? Mo Jingshan casually sat on the leather chair behind the office table. He lazily leaned back and loosened his collar. His eyes carried a hint of a smile. After Jin Wan crawled out, she stood up and said stubbornly, "This office table of yours is definitely made of high-quality wood. There's no smell of glue or formaldehyde at all. Not bad, not bad." Mo Jingshan raised his brows slightly. That's it. What else? Jin Wan raised a hand to tidy up her clothes that were slightly messy from her earlier actions. She could not possibly say that earlier, when she was under the table, every time she raised her head, the first thing she saw was Mo Jingshan's legs. His sitting posture could not be considered reserved. It was calm and casual. He did not cross his legs but casually spread them apart. His legs were long and firm, but every time she raised her head, the first thing that entered her eyes was the place between his legs. Seeing Jin Wan's wandering gaze, Mo Jingshan chuckled lightly. "Why are you hiding so far away? Come here." Jin Wan tugged on her coat but did not go over. Mo Jingshan stood up and approached her. He looked down at the little woman who was shorter than him by more than a head. "Do you mind now? If I said I don't mind, would you believe me?" Not thinking too much about it did not mean he did not mind. His dark, calm eyes watched her expression of wanting to be rational but unable to suppress her emotions. He raised a hand and pinched her snow-white ear that was not wearing any earrings. Jin Wan trembled involuntarily. Chapter 71. Mo Jingshan's tone was low and mild. "Secretary and was directly transferred here from America by my father. Regardless of the reason for her transfer, or the seriousness and professionalism of her work, there is nothing to be picky about." Jin Wan mildly curved her lips, but her smile did not reach her eyes. "Grandfather Mo said that she is very outstanding. It seems like it's true. Even you can't find any flaws in her. Right now, shouldn't I feel a sense of danger?" Mo Jingshan gently tapped her forehead with his finger. "The entire office is filled with the scent of your jealousy. Her contact here is limited to work-related matters. In the company, aside from official business, we won't see each other more than once." Jin Wan really wanted to say that she was not being petty, but his father's intention of placing her here was clear. She could not just ignore it. "I'm not being jealous, but Mr. Mo, I have to make things clear." Jin Wan's tone was cold and she appeared even calmer. "Since I'm Mrs. Mo, I won't easily give up my position to any woman. I'm also very clear about this. After all, Grandfather Mo has said that the elders have long wanted to force that surname into your hands. However, you've always had no interest in her. Since you were previously uninterested based on your personality in the next few decades, you won't have any interest in her that you shouldn't have." Mo Jingshan did not speak, silently watching her. However, it was not hard to see that his mood was quite good because of her words. "But even if I'm clear about this secretary and is not a simple secretary. Every day in your company, whether it's work, meetings, business trips, or social engagements, you two will inevitably come into contact. There will be knots in my heart, and as time passes, my thoughts will run wild. It will affect my emotions and affect my trust in you as well as my judgment." After saying this, Jin Wan directly turned to leave. "I'll only say this. In the future, I won't say a single word about this matter. I'm hungry. Let's go eat hot pot." Mo Jingshan watched as Jin Wan appeared to say, "This great aunt will leave my words here today." He could not help but laugh. She was really free and easy. Jin Wan was about to leave the office. She did not care if he had the time to accompany her to eat. All of a sudden, her hand was gripped by a strong force. In the next second she was pulled back, almost falling into the man's embrace. She subconsciously tried to steady herself, but Mo Jingshan pressed her into his embrace, not giving her any room to retreat. His lips curled into a smile. "Look at your half-angry look. It's not entirely a good thing to be rational over willfulness. Why don't you vent your anger on me?" "I don't have a temper. He's so outstanding. How could I have a temper? Jinwan looked away from him. In the end, Mo Jingshan could not help but laugh. He rubbed her small, mocking face. I don't plan on keeping her for long. Jinwan glanced at him. How long is not long? Secretary and is highly regarded in the eyes of the elders of both families. Her relationship with the Mo family and my relationship with her meant that we couldn't chase her away so quickly. Give me 2 weeks and I'll definitely give you a satisfactory answer, Jinwan was expressionless. My relationship with you? She actually likes you, doesn't she? Otherwise, she wouldn't have returned to the country so obediently. After all, Shine is the Mo family's true foundation. Her development there will be better. Coming here can only mean that her goal is you. Jinwan suddenly thought of her past life. The 10 years he had left. At that time, Mo Jingshan had already become the true owner of Shine in America. With a flip of his hand, he could summon clouds and rain. During those years, did this secretarian have any contact with him? Thinking of this, her originally calm heart began to churn. Rationality told her that she could not be dissatisfied over such a matter, but her emotions were still swayed. She pursed her lips and moved to push him away, saying, I'm hungry. I want to go eat. Let go. In the end, not only was she unable to move away from his embrace, she even took several steps back. By the time she reacted, her back was already pressed against the office door. The hand that was previously wrapped around her waist was now pressed against the door behind her ear. Jinwan's heart instantly shrank, but she tried to raise her voice to maintain her bottom line. She angrily said, Mo Jingshan, what are you doing? I'm hungry. I want to go eat. If you don't have time, I'll go myself. I'm just making things clear. I can't just watch you walk out angrily. Mo Jingshan lowered his head to look at her face. He calmly said, your emotions are unstable. If I don't act like this, how can I talk to you? I don't need you to say anything to me. Earlier, didn't you ask me to give you 2 weeks' time? If I don't object, that means I've already agreed. What else do you want to say? Right now, Jinwan did not want to speak to him so closely. My wife is you now and will only be you in the future. His tone was cold and calm, but it was serious that could not be ignored. Jinwan immediately fell silent. She pursed her lips and looked at him. Mo Jingshan saw that she was clearly aggrieved but was unwilling to reveal it. He sighed softly and leaned down to kiss her lips. He stopped by her lips and said hoarsely, Mrs. Mo, although jealousy means that you care about me, if you feel aggrieved because of this, my heart will ache. Jinwan glared at him. She thought to herself, since your heart aches for me, you actually want me to endure it for 2 whole weeks? Mo Jingshan suddenly chuckled lowly, speaking softly against her lips. 1 week in? Jinwan? Did this man really know how to read minds? However, Jinwan was not someone so unreasonable. 1 week it is. We've agreed for these few days, you're not allowed to have any physical contact with her. Even if she hands you a document during a meeting, your hands are not allowed to touch. Mo Jingshan could not help but laugh. All right. Jinwan finally softened in front of him and no longer resisted. Not angry anymore? He asked softly. I wasn't angry in the first place. Jinwan remained stubborn. Mo Jingshan smiled. Let's go. Go where? Aren't we going to eat hot pot? Jinwan was bewildered. It's already past 1:30. It's working hours. Isn't that bad? I'm the boss. Who dares to say no? Although she said this, Jinwan still shifted her gaze away from the door. She watched as Mo Jingshan picked up his suit jacket and walked over. A small knot in her heart immediately blurted out, that secretarian, does she really like you? Perhaps I didn't pay much attention. What kind of reply was this? Isn't the Mo family very close to her family? Haven't you known each other for many years? Chapter 72. Walking out of the office, Jinwan was still wondering if grandfather Mo and Mo Jingshan's father would have a fierce battle soon. She also did not know who would win the battle of granddaughter-in-law between the father and son. However, it seemed like the key to victory rested on Mo Jingshan. Just as she was thinking, Mo Jingshan suddenly held her wrist and walked toward the elevator. She glanced at a female employee who was passing by. She was currently looking in their direction with envy and surprise. Wasn't it too high profile to display their affection in the company? Jinwan rushed to pull her hand back, but Mo Jingshan tightened his grip on her hand, not giving her a chance to escape. Just as they were about to reach the private elevator, she could vaguely see the female employee holding her chest and muttering. However, she could not hear what they were muttering about. How would she know that anyone in the company who saw this scene would definitely be shocked? In the company, it was not an exaggeration to say that CEO Mo was a cold-faced demon. The employees were all trembling with fear, afraid that they would make the slightest mistake in front of CEO Mo. After all, Mo Corporation was not a good place to stay. No one could casually spend their days here. In the company, CEO Mo never had such a patient and warm side. He would not easily fly into a rage, but he was definitely not easy to talk to. In everyone's hearts, aside from being cold, there was only coldness. But who would have thought that CEO Mo would actually dote on his wife so much? Earlier, when CEO Mo had looked at Jean Wan with a gentle smile, it had really taken her life. CEO Mo, just as the private elevator stopped at the top floor before the door opened, Secretary Anne's voice suddenly came from the side. Jean Wan heard that voice and subconsciously turned to look at her. Secretary Anne's gaze was fixed on Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan did not turn back. His voice was light and clear. What is it? You have a meeting with DC Corporation CEO at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, head to the meeting room to listen to the finance department's monthly report. Are you heading out now? Then do you need me to move your afternoon schedule to tomorrow? And Shuyan's eyes did not blink as she watched Mo Jingshan. In this short period of time, she did not even glance at Jean Wan once. Mo Jingshan's tone was mild. The meeting with DC will be moved to tomorrow morning. I'll return to the company before 4. And Shuyan's expression did not change, but she reminded him softly, but CEO Mo, the CEO of DC Group has already made an appointment with you for more than a month. It wasn't easy to get his approval, and today he can finally discuss with you personally, Jean Wan said in a low voice that only he could hear. If you have something to do in the afternoon, go ahead. I just mentioned the hot pot casually. It's not like I have to eat it. As soon as she finished speaking, he squeezed her palm without batting an eyelid. Her hand was held in his palm. Jean Wan did not say anything more. Secretary Anne had described his busy afternoon in such detail. She wouldn't believe it if she didn't purposely let her hear it. Although the secretary was only a secretary, Mo Jingshan was the person in charge of the company. He knew how to handle everything. If Mo Jingshan didn't think it was necessary to give that company too much face, Jean Wan didn't say much. Mo, it's almost 2 o'clock. If you don't have anything important, you should wait for the DC people to meet before leaving. And Shuyan's tone was still formal. Her eyes were still fixed on Mo Jingshan's profile. Mo Jingshan's expression was natural and normal. His tone was mild. Jean Wan is hungry. We can't wait. It was a very casual attitude. Jean Wan silently chuckled. She really wanted to pinch him. She wasn't a reincarnated hungry ghost. Who said she couldn't wait? She narrowed her eyes and did not say anything. She did not pinch him, nor did she look at Secretary Anne. She only used her fingernails to secretly dig into his palm, but it only made him grip her even tighter. And Shuyan paused. Her expression was calm as she slowly nodded. She then smiled slightly. All right, I understand, Xiaomo. Ever since she was young, Mo Jingshan had always been a cold and distant man. However, this was the first time she felt that he was even more distant, even colder. The distance between them was clearly much wider than before. The two of them entered the elevator. And Shuyan watched as the doors slowly closed. She held the documents in her hands and was silent for a long time. Her expression did not change as she turned to leave. She seems to be an opponent. Jean Wan stood in the elevator by Mo Jingshan's side. She casually and softly said this. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. She's very calm, Jean Wan commented. It was the calmness of someone who was determined to win over Mo Jingshan. It was the calmness of someone who did not place Jean Wan's existence in her eyes at all. It was so calm that it triggered Jean Wan's small desire to win. She raised her hand to hold onto Mo Jingshan's arm, saying firmly, but no matter how outstanding or confident some people are, they can't interfere in someone else's marriage and become a third party. Mo Jingshan, no matter how many women are eyeing you, you can only be my man. Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. And your man? Jean Wan raised her eyes to look at the reflection of the mirror on the elevator door. They were standing together. The man was extraordinarily handsome. His gray shirt gave off a clear aura, and his hair appeared as though it had been washed 1,000 times in a day. He did not need to use any glue or styling, and he was already so handsome that one could not shift their eyes away. Even though he was casually standing, he appeared extremely straight. He was currently looking down at her by his side, a faint smile on his lips. The place they were going to was right below his company. The two did not drive and directly walked there. After entering the restaurant, Jinwan asked, "Are you sure you can eat spicy food?" She could not really handle it herself, but sometimes she would feel a little greedy and really wanted to eat it. However, she did not seem to have a good understanding of Mo Jingshan's preferences. As Mrs. Mo, she was really ashamed. When Mo Jingshan entered, he gave her an unfathomable gaze. It was clear that he was slightly prejudiced against her question of common sense. Jinwan did not speak anymore. She entered and found a place to sit down. Earlier, she did not manage to make a reservation over the phone. Thankfully, there were not many people dining here at this time. A good seat by the window on the second floor was empty. "Welcome. May I ask how many people are dining?" The waiter approached. "2 people, Jinwan replied. Mo Jingshan did not speak and directly sat down opposite her. He received the menu from the waiter and placed it by her side without even looking at it. "Order whatever you like to eat." Seeing that the great COMO did not appear to be unaccustomed to this place that was filled with the fragrance of hot pot, Jinwan lowered her head to look at the menu. She ticked off the numbers on it and after a while, she raised her head to look at him. "Do you like to eat vegetables or meat? If it's meat, lamb or beef. Do you like duck intestines and pork tenderloin?" After asking, she saw that Mo Jingshan's disapproving gaze was directed at her. Chapter 73. Mo Jingshan's eyes swept past her face, calmly saying, "Vegetables." Jinwan was slightly embarrassed as she marked the vegetables on the plate. She understood that Mo Jingshan preferred vegetarian food, so she ordered some other light dishes. She then handed the menu to him. "See if there's anything you want to add? I didn't order too much." Mo Jingshan received it but did not look at it, directly handing it to the waiter by the table. "What would the two of you like to drink? Do you have hot water?" "Plain water is fine too," Jinwan asked. "Yes, we'll bring it up immediately." "Sir, what would you like to drink?" "The same." Jinwan immediately raised her eyes to look at Mo Jingshan, silently remembering in her heart that she knew Mo Jingshan did not like milk. He also did not particularly like coffee or tea. Furthermore, like her, he had a soft spot for plain water. With such a healthy diet, she had most likely already grasped his tastes. The waiter turned to leave with the menu. Not long after, the clear soup Jinwan had ordered was brought over. In less than a minute, steam began to rise between the two of them. "I was worried earlier that you wouldn't be used to such an environment," Jinwan said as she received the glass pot from the waiter. Inside was warm water with lemon slices. Mo Jingshan's handsome brows moved slightly. "What do you mean?" "It's hot pot. For someone like you who usually socializes in hotels and goes to formal occasions, I don't think you have a preference for this kind of thing." "It's true that I don't have a preference, but it doesn't mean that I won't eat it." Mo Jingshan only smiled, not mocking her for deviating from the topic. "Then do you like sweet food?" Jinwan suddenly held her face, looking at the man's handsome face through the steam. He watched her. "Are you planning to start understanding my preferences?" Jinwan smiled calmly. "There's no helping it. Today I suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. If I don't take the initiative, my husband will be snatched away by someone else." Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. "I'm guessing that you definitely don't eat sweet food," Jinwan muttered to herself. Previously, when he bought the glutinous rice balls for her to eat, there were many leftovers. He did not eat a single bite. The taste was too sweet. He most likely did not like it. He raised his eyebrows. She had answered correctly. After eating the hot pot to their heart's content, Jinwan kept asking questions, to which Mo Jingshan occasionally answered and occasionally ignored. In the end, when she even asked him what color he liked, he could no longer bear it and brought this little woman, who had suddenly become inquisitive, out of the hot pot restaurant. Jinwan stayed at home and read the company's documents and various reports for 2 days. She did not go out. In the meantime, Ji Minggran had called her twice, but she didn't pick up either of them. She pretended to be dead and ignored them. The night before Elder Mo's birthday banquet, Ji Minggran called again. Jinwan had just come out of the study. She glanced at the caller ID and picked up the call expressionlessly. "Big sister, didn't you and brother Jingshan return to the Yu Garden these few days?" Ji Minggran's voice was cautious. Jinwan's tone was unhurried. "No, what? You went to the Imperial Garden to look for us?" "I had a gathering with my classmates in the afternoon and passed by the Yu Garden. I wanted to go in to look for you, but Auntie Chin said that you and brother Jingshan haven't returned to the Yu Garden recently." "Passed by the Yu Garden?" The Yu Garden was located in the southern part of Haicheng. It was located in a secluded location. No matter where Ji Minggran went, if she wanted to return to the Ji family, it was impossible for her to pass by the Yu garden. Indeed, I haven't returned to stay. Your brother-in-law and I have been spending some time together. It will probably be a few days before we return to the Yu garden, Jinwan said with a warm smile. Ji Minggran seemed to be stunned by her reply. After a moment of silence, she cautiously asked, "Then where are you and brother Jingshin staying recently? I'll go look for you. Won't we be able to see each other tomorrow when we go to the Mo family? Why are you in such a rush to look for me today?" Jinwan was too lazy to pretend to be passionate. Her tone was cold as she rejected, "If there's anything, let's talk tomorrow. I'm still busy. I brought something good for you. Big sister, if it's convenient for you, let me go look for you." Ji Minggran was very persistent. Jinwan was silent for a moment. She wanted to see what exactly she was trying to hide. Tomorrow was Grandfather Mo's birthday banquet. For the past 2 days, Ji Minggran had been so eager to contact her. There was definitely something fishy going on. Jinwan met up with Ji Minggran at a dessert shop. From start to finish, Jinwan did not reveal where she was staying. When they arrived at the dessert shop, Ji Minggran saw Jinwan sitting by the window drinking milk tea and looking at her phone. She walked in. Jinwan pretended not to see her. Her eyes were glued to the few news articles that had just been scrolled down. She appeared to be defenseless. When Ji Minggran walked to the table, she only spoke gently and coolly, "Take a seat. What exactly is the matter?" She was too lazy to give Ji Minggran too much face, and there was no need for her to pretend to have a deep sisterly relationship. Ji Minggran pushed an exquisite square box toward her. "Previously, didn't you say that you were going to give a chessboard to Elder Mo? I begged Dad for a long time and he finally agreed to give me this chessboard. Big sister, tomorrow you can give this to Grandfather Mo." Ji Minggran did not know that the chess record was already in her hands. Jinwan did not even raise her head, continuing to look at her phone. Her voice was cold and clear, carrying with it a distance of 1,000 miles. "Grandfather Mo's birthday, you seem to be very concerned about it." Ji Minggran's expression was that of a good younger sister naturally thinking for her older sister. "After all, you are my older sister and brother Jingshin treats me very well. I have to do my part for the both of you." "Is that so?" Jinwan placed her phone down, calmly looking at Ji Minggran. The moment their eyes met, Ji Minggran's heart trembled under her cold gaze. "Big sister, recently you've really distanced yourself from me. You won't let me go to the Yu garden, and now you won't even tell me where you're staying. What exactly are you guarding against?" Jinwan glanced at the box on the table, reaching out to open it. She saw that it was indeed the jade chessboard from the early Tang dynasty that her father had kept for many years. It was actually real. As expected, it was very abnormal. Jinwan closed the box, slightly curling her fair fingers. Her knuckles seemed to carelessly knock on the glass table. "Why have you been so paranoid recently? Could it be that you've really done something to let me down?" Ji Minggran's originally natural expression almost froze. "How could I possibly do anything to let you down? You're my sister, my biological sister." Jinwan's gaze once again returned to her phone. Her tone was light and breezy. "Isn't that enough? If you haven't done anything wrong, why are you always worried?" I was just asking. I was afraid that you'd be too distant with me. Since I'm thinking too much, then I won't ask any more." Jinwan was cold and did not reply. After around 10 minutes, Ji Minggran found an excuse to leave. Chapter 74. Not long after Jinwan returned, she was still organizing the documents when she heard the door open. She stood up to see Mo Jingshin's silhouette appear by the door. It was already past 9. He had a social engagement tonight and did not drink much. Although the smell of alcohol on him was not strong, Jinwan could still smell it the moment she approached. "Your social engagement ended so early?" Jinwan approached to ask, casually taking the jacket he had just taken off. Mo Jingshin was about to toss the jacket to the side when he saw Jinwan's natural movements. His gaze paused on her face for a moment before he smiled and handed the jacket to her. "Mrs. Mo is home alone. I can't let you wait for too long." Every time this man's gaze landed on her, it was as though it was dyed with endless darkness. It was like the ocean in the night sky, causing one to be unable to see its bottom. However, it caused Jinwan's heart to beat faster. Especially at night when there was no one else in the house, this feeling was even more obvious. Last night, Jinwan used the excuse of reading the company's documents for an entire day to fall asleep early. No matter what, she could not let Mo Jingshin, who went to bed on time, have his way. Tonight, could she use the excuse of going to Grandfather Mo's birthday celebration tomorrow to bluff her way through for one more night? Do you want to take a shower first? Although the faint smell of alcohol on his body was not unpleasant, Jinwan felt that it was better for him to take a shower first. Otherwise, if he continued to stare at her like this, she would most likely be thrown onto the bed in less than 10 minutes. He was clearly a man with a gentle aura. Even the smile on his lips was filled with gentlemanly self-restraint. But who knew better than her? In bed, this man, cough. Not only did he not control himself, he would even bite. The hickeys on her body had just faded slightly. She did not want to let him have his way again. All right. He did not reject. While he entered the bathroom to take a shower, Jinwan directly went to boil some water. Although he was not drunk, it was common for different types of alcohol to be mixed at social engagements. Even if he was not drunk, it would still hurt his stomach. She wanted to make a cup of tea to warm his stomach and sober up. Furthermore, this rare feeling of simply enjoying a world with just the two of them, to her, she really wanted to cherish it more. In the bathroom, the sound of water did not stop. Jinwan recalled that she had forgotten to bring his clothes to change earlier and turned to return to the bedroom. A few minutes later, she placed the clothes in front of the bathroom door. She knocked once. "I'll leave the clothes outside." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to leave. However, before she could turn around, he suddenly opened the bathroom door. Jinwan's eyelids twitched. Perhaps this was not the first time she had seen such a high-definition and censored scene, but she still blushed. He was on the bed, but he suddenly stood in front of her so openly. She couldn't accept it, so she turned around and wanted to run away. Unexpectedly, Mo Jingshin suddenly reached out and pulled her back. "Ah, you're covered in water. You haven't wiped it off yet. What are you going to do? Come, let's wash together." The next day, before going to the Mo family, Jinwan first returned to the Ji home. After a night of indulgence, there was not a single part of Jinwan's body that did not feel sore. Even when she walked, her legs felt weak. "Why didn't you go to the Mo family with Jingshin?" Ji Hongwen asked when he saw Jinwan. Jinwan answered with a smile. Some relatives who came back from abroad arrived in the wee hours of the morning. There wasn't a convenient car, so Jingshin went to the airport to pick them up. "I didn't intend for him to detour half of Haicheng to come home to pick me up, so I came to go to the Mo home with you." The group boarded the car and prepared to set off. Before they set off, Jinwan suddenly said, "Wait for me in the car. My stomach isn't feeling well. I'll be right back." Ji Minggran and Shin Haru had already boarded the car. Their eyes were fixed on her figure. For some reason, they felt that Jinwan's motive for coming back so early in the morning was not so pure. However, they had already boarded the car, and there was no way for them to get off to check on the situation. Shin Haru sat in the car and could not help but say, "Nuan, wouldn't it be better to call the Mo family chauffeur to pick her up? Taking such a long detour back to the Ji home, I really don't know what she's thinking." Ji Hongwen coldly glanced at her. "Even if Nuan is the Mo family's granddaughter-in-law, she's still my Ji Hongwen's daughter. Jingshin isn't by her side, so there's nothing wrong with her going with us." Several minutes later, Jinwan came out. She opened the door and entered the car. Her expression did not seem strange at all. Ji Minggran did not say a word as she sat in the back seat. However, she kept glancing at Jinwan's bag from time to time. Shin Haru glanced at her and did not notice anything strange. She then shifted her gaze away. The Mo family's old mansion was located under a mountain range with excellent feng shui in Haicheng. It occupied a large area and was located in the suburbs of Qingshan, which had the best air quality. Their car had just arrived when a slightly older figure walked out. It was the Mo family's butler, Uncle O. He came out with a smile. "Elder Mo is currently receiving guests inside and could not come out to welcome you. He specially sent me to invite you in." As he spoke, Uncle O glanced at Shin Haru, who was following behind Ji Hongwen. Thinking of the family behind Shin Haru, he could not help but smile. What a coincidence. The Qing family is also here today. It's rare to see people from the four main families of Haicheng appear at the same place. The four main families of Haicheng, the Mo family, the Qin family, the Ji family, and the Xing family. Before Shin Haru married Ji Hongwen, she had relied on the Xing family to survive because of her ex-husband, although she no longer had any connection with the Xing family. "That's right." Ji Minggran suddenly interrupted in a low voice. "But Auntie Shin is the only one who came today. I haven't seen Brother Sheng for a long time." Hearing the words Brother Sheng, Ji Hongwen's eyes turned cold, and Shin Haru suddenly looked a little uncomfortable. In silence, they all took a seemingly unintentional look at Jinwan. Jinwan raised her hand, her expression unchanged, and casually tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Uncle O, where is Grandfather Mo receiving guests? Let's go straight there. Uncle O led them inside. Wherever she passed by, the guests' attitudes toward Jinwan were not very warm. In her previous life, Jinwan had never been nice to these elders. If she suddenly took the initiative to greet them now, it would be too strange and the change in her character would be too abrupt, so she simply followed Uncle O quietly all the way. Uncle O led them into the banquet hall inside. At first glance, they saw Elder Mo, who was in high spirits although he was leaning on a cane. Hey, are you all here? Seeing them, Elder Mo turned and walked over. Grandfather, I wish you happiness as boundless as the East Sea and longevity as long as the South Mountain. Jinwan rarely looked gentle and obedient. Jingshan has just picked up the guests from afar at the airport. I guess they will be here soon. When everyone is here, we will give you a good birthday. No hurry, no hurry. It's good that you are here. I'm happy to see you all together. Elder Mo was in a good mood because it was the first time that Jinwan had called him grandfather so intimately. He thought of the phone call he made to the United States 2 nights ago and scolded his son for more than half an hour. Thinking about it, he felt it was worth it. Grandfather Mo, happy birthday. Suddenly, a soft voice came with a hint of gentleness and respect. Chapter 75. Although she did not expect it, it was not too sudden for her to come. Although Shuyan was only Mo Jingshan's secretary, she was friends with the Mo family. Right now, she was in the country and it was Elder Mo's 80th birthday. It was normal for her to come. Jinwan immediately saw the exquisite gift box Shuyan was holding. And Shuyan was extremely beautiful. Her brows were soft, her facial features exquisite, and her aura elegant. Today she had dressed up meticulously. She was no longer wearing the simple attire she wore in the office. Instead, she was wearing a low-key, gentle dress that showed off her status. Her every frown and every smile was like the daughter of a wealthy family the elders spoke of. Elder Mo turned back. Shuyan is here so early? You've just returned not long ago. You should still be jet-lagged. It's a rare day off, so you should rest more. Why did you wake up so early? And Shuyan acted as though she did not see Jinwan, who was being tugged by Elder Mo's side. She only smiled and said, It's fine. Mo usually takes good care of me. It won't be too tiring working by his side. As she spoke, it was as though her earlier words were unintentional. She smiled and handed over the gift box in her hands. This child, it's already not easy for her to come back to visit. Why did she bring a gift? Elder Mo smiled, excitedly reaching out to receive it. Shuyan has already grown so big? We're really old. Wasn't this child developing in America? Why did she suddenly return? Could it be that she specially came to celebrate Elder Mo's birthday? She's really thoughtful. When the elders of the Mo family entered the door and saw Shuyan, they directly approached her with smiles on their faces. At the same time, someone agreed, That's right. Back then, we all thought that Shuyan would become the Mo family's granddaughter-in-law. Who would have thought? Before that person could finish speaking, he was slapped on the hand by his husband. He immediately shut his mouth and looked awkwardly toward Jinwan. In an instant, everyone's gaze shifted toward Jinwan. Jinwan appeared as though she did not hear anything. She received the unopened gift box from the elder's hands and placed it on the shelf by the side. She turned back to say, Everyone sit down and chat. I'll go cut some fruits for you. The surrounding people who were waiting to watch a good show were startled. They did not expect Jinwan to take on the attitude of half a mistress of the Mo family without batting an eyelid. Even the opportunity for others to continue making sarcastic remarks had been blocked. And Shuyan saw that her unopened gift had already been placed on the display shelf at the side, buried under the other gifts. She was still smiling, and her eyes seemed to inadvertently look in the direction Jinwan had left. This Jinwan seemed to be different from the one she had heard before returning to the country. Jinwan brought the freshly cut fruit out. Her words and actions were appropriate. The elders who were waiting to catch her could only glance at her. Due to the presence of the elder, most of them reluctantly gave her some face, but there were still some whose eyes were filled with obvious disdain. Girl, go outside and take a look. Has Jingshan returned? Elder Mo saw that almost all the guests had arrived and directly spoke to Jinwan. All right. Jinwan turned to leave. Right now, not only was Jinwan's actions impeccable, even the elder had clearly revealed her identity in front of everyone. Any unfriendly gazes were clearly seen by the elder. Jinwan walked to the courtyard where Elder Mo and the guests could not see her. She suddenly saw her aunt, Mo Pylon, standing in front of her. She was currently chatting and laughing with several middle-aged women around her age. She turned back to see Jinwan and coldly glared at her. Jinwan pretended not to see and walked out. Mo Pylon walked over and blocked her path. Yo, didn't you just arrive? Where are you going? Could it be that you were chased out? Without the elder's protection, I'm afraid you'll be crushed to death by the eyes of your relatives and friends, right? In this Mo family, there really aren't many who like you. Jinwan's expression did not change. Look at my eyes. I actually just saw Aunt. Why didn't you go in to sit? Instead, you're standing outside eating melon seeds? Mo Pylon's expression faltered. Before she could speak, she heard Jinwan leisurely say with a smile, I almost forgot. The Mo family has a rule. I'm afraid there isn't even a place for Aunt to sit in the guest hall. Inside are all the Mo family's direct relatives or important figures. As for you, you can only grab a handful of melon seeds and stand outside in the cold wind. Mo Pylon harshly glared at her. If it wasn't for Jingshen protecting you, do you think you can enter? Jinwan is the Mo family's official granddaughter-in-law. Even if others can't enter, she has to. All of a sudden, Mo Jingshen's voice came from behind Mo Pylon. Mo Pylon faltered. She turned to meet Mo Jingshen's clear and cold gaze. Mo Jingshen walked past her. Jinwan saw him approaching. He indeed possessed all the qualities that made him the center of attention. Since he did not need to go to the company today, Mo Jingshen was dressed casually. He wore a light-colored turtleneck sweater, straight trousers, and a beige windbreaker. He rarely wore warm colors. Today he was not dressed high and mighty, but it made him appear more realistic in front of Jinwan. His fashionable and low-profile clothes made his skin look slightly pale. Under the dazzling sunlight in the front yard of the Mo family's old mansion, it seemed to be hidden. Only a pair of deep, ink-like eyes and thin lips could be seen. They were so bright and beautiful that one could not shift their eyes away. Mo Jingshen had gone to the airport very early today. He had been picking up guests until now, but he didn't look tired at all. When he came up to Jinwan, his brows relaxed, his lips curved, and he adjusted the collar of her coat. Why aren't you inside? Why did you come out? Grandfather looked at the time and felt that you should be back soon. He asked me to come out and pick you up. Go in. Don't stand outside in the cold wind. Mo Jingshen put his arm around Jinwan's waist and walked back. He did not even give that so-called aunt a second glance. They entered the guest hall. Originally, it was bustling with various guests chatting in groups of 3 to 5. The elder was also speaking with several elders. The moment Mo Jingshen appeared, the hall suddenly became quieter. The moment they saw Jinwan, who was openly held by Mo Jingshen, walk through the door, the guests who had secretly ridiculed her when he was not around all fell silent. None of them dared to make a sound. As Mo Jingshen walked through the door, their expressions softened. The mockery turned into flattery, the mockery turned into smiles, and their cold gazes turned into warm gazes. Jinwan thought that the Mo family's relatives and friends were all elites who had been honed in the upper class. Even if these people had many tricks up their sleeves right now, they were all blocked by Mo Jingshen's sharp eyes. Chapter 76. Today those who had the right to attend the Mo family home were all from the upper class of Haicheng and even the country. From the political and business circles to the media and entertainment circles, they had all sent representatives to attend. Although it was called a birthday banquet, it was more like a social test. Everyone's expression was a show of the ways of the world. Mo Pylon was unwilling to give up. She followed them in from outside the door. The moment she stepped in, she spoke, Miss Ji is really capable. You can coax our Jingshen into treating you like a precious jewel. You're so capable, yet you haven't returned to the Mo family in half a year after getting married. Why don't you continue to grow your skills and continue to be Mrs. Mo in the U Garden? Why did you come to the Mo family home? After all, you've never placed us old things in your eyes. Jinwan was about to speak up when Mo Jingshen pressed down on her in his arms. Jinwan's health isn't good. I was the one who arranged for her to rest more in the U Garden and go out less. It has nothing to do with Jinwan. Mo Jingshen spoke up to protect her. His attitude was cold and indifferent, not giving her any face at all. Mo Pylon rolled her eyes. The last time she brought her daughter to the U Garden, she did not receive any benefits. She could not take this lying down. Today it was not only Mo Jingshen and the elder who were present. No matter what, Mo Pylon had to teach Jinwan a lesson. Elder, quickly look. This is the first time Jing Shin has brought his wife back after getting married, and he already has such an attitude. He completely doesn't place us elders in his eyes. If this continues, I'm afraid even you won't be able to compete with Jinwan's status. What Jinwan says is one and what she says is two. If Jinwan is unhappy and tells Jing Shin not to return to the Mo family, I'm afraid he'll really cut off all ties with the Mo family. Pylon, you're already so old. Don't you know how to keep a lid on your words? Elder Mo furrowed his brows, his gaze impatient as he said, I asked them to set up their wedding house in the U Garden and not stay in the Mo family home. I wanted them to live peacefully. This half a year there hasn't been any major events at home. Jing Shin is usually busy at the company. Why would they return to the Mo family? Stop stirring up trouble here. Mo Pylon's expression froze, and she had no choice but to change her expression. Although she had a smile on her face, she still continued to nitpick, how am I instigating? Elder, this Jinwan hasn't returned home even once since she got married. I'm just trying to talk to her from the perspective of an elder. Besides, our Jing Shin is so good in all aspects. Why did he marry Jinwan? Aside from having an empty face, this Ji family's eldest daughter is not worthy of our Jing Shin. After Mo Pylon finished speaking, she met Mo Jingshin's cold gaze and subconsciously turned to look at Elder Mo. However, she did not receive any good looks from him and could only shift her gaze to a corner to avoid feeling guilty from being stared at by Elder Mo. Oh, that's right. The words I said today also include the wishes of Jingshin's father. At this time she could only use Mo Jingshin's father to suppress Jinwan. Otherwise, Jinwan would really think that by relying on Mo Jingshin and the elder's support, she could do whatever she wanted in the Mo family. Not far away, and Shuyen, who was seated on the sofa, slightly raised her brows to look at Mo Jingshin. After Mo Jingshin entered, he did not even look in that direction. Everyone in the guest hall was watching Mo Pylon fearlessly charging into the muzzle of a gun. No one interrupted. However, Mo Jingshin's indifferent expression and Jinwan's moderate smile were like a mirror, reflecting Mo Pylon's sour expression that she couldn't eat. His father? Elder Mo stood up, slamming the walking stick in his hand heavily against the ground. He sternly said, I'm his father's old man. This old man hasn't said anything yet. How can it be his father's turn to speak? Mo Pylon's expression faltered. She did not expect Elder Mo's temper to be so sudden. I'm saying, grandfather, it's fine. Auntie is after all an elder. It's not a big deal for her to scold me. Previously, I didn't return to the Mo family to show my filial piety. It's indeed my fault. Jinwan spoke up, her lips carrying a suitable smile. Mo Jingshin mildly curved his lips, helping her block Mo Pylon's following words. Auntie, Nwan's stomach may already be pregnant with the Mo family's great-grandson. Don't scare her. After speaking under everyone's shocked gazes, he held Jinwan, who was slightly stunned, and sat on the leather sofa by the side. His actions and words were naturally protective. There was not a single part that did not show how important Jinwan was to Mo Jingshin. It also showed that Jinwan was not just carrying the title of Mrs. Mo Jingshin really doted on her and cared about her very much. What did you say earlier? Elder Mo appeared as though he had just woken up from a dream. Right now, he could not care less about Mo Pylon's twisted expression and directly glanced at Jinwan's stomach. Mo Jingshin's gaze was cold and calm. Jinwan suffered a cold when she was young. Her body is slightly weak. Even if she wants to be pregnant, she still needs a period of time to recuperate. In the past half a year, I've been letting her rest in the U Garden and reduce her movements. I didn't expect that such a small family matter would be an eyesore to Auntie's eyes. The elder approached step by step with his walking stick. Looking at Jinwan, he could not close his mouth from smiling. This child, if your body is weak, just say so. It's fine if your body is weak. With Jing Shin around, after a period of recuperation, you'll definitely be able to give birth to a healthy baby. Don't worry, in the future, grandfather will look after you. Don't care about any rumors. Take good care of yourself. If you're already pregnant, that would be even better. But you still have to take care of your own body. Grandfather's body is still strong. I can wait. As he spoke, the elder turned back to glare at Mo Pylon. Jinwan has been preparing for pregnancy and has been recuperating at home. In the end, look at what you've said. You're already so old, but you only know how to stir up trouble all day long. Mo Pylon was somewhat embarrassed. She pulled a long face, but she did not dare to casually mock and speculate about the matter of the Mo family's great-grandson. After all, this was the elder's bottom line. If she crossed the bottom line, it was likely that she would not be able to enter the Mo family's door in the future. On the other side, Jinwan quietly glanced at the man beside her from time to time. Preparing for pregnancy? Mo Jingshan was indeed very black-bellied. With just these two words he was enough to block out all the words against her. After all, her position as Mrs. Mo was stable. Now that the matter of preparing for pregnancy was involved, no one dared to offend her, for fear that if they made her unhappy and caused any problems to the Mo family's great-grandson, they would be directly beaten into the 18th level of hell by Elder Mo with his walking stick. But, the matter of preparing for pregnancy, with so many people watching, Jinwan did not know where to put her hand. Should she put it on her belly for show? Or should she and Mo Jingshan sat on the sofa. The man's hand held hers again. Their hands intertwined naturally, and he placed them on his lap, finally giving her the most suitable place to put her hand. Chapter 77. By the afternoon, more than half of the guests had left. The official birthday banquet would begin in the evening. The Mo family did not continue to receive guests from outside. Those who stayed in the guest hall were the immediate family members of the Mo family, or relatives and friends who were very close to them in terms of social status. Grandfather Mo, I didn't have the chance to speak earlier. This is the gift our Ji family has prepared for you. Ji Minggran stood by the table and took out an exquisite antique box. When she said this, she intentionally glanced at Jinwan. Jinwan sensed her gaze but did not react. When the relatives at the table saw that someone had started this again, all kinds of special gifts were placed on the table one by one. This time they were no longer casually stacked on the gift racks. Instead, they took the initiative to open the gifts and show them to the old man as if they were presenting treasures. Ji Minggran saw that the time was right. She abruptly opened her mouth. Big sister, why haven't I seen your birthday gift? Quickly take it out for Grandfather Mo to see. I dare to believe that your birthday gift will definitely be very special. As she spoke, she winked at Jinwan. She smiled brightly, appearing innocent. It is indeed special. After all, it wasn't easy to obtain. Jinwan took out the red sandalwood box that she could not tell what was inside and placed it on the table. Seeing that the size of the box was the same as the chessboard that Ji Minggran had previously given her, Ji Minggran's eyes revealed a hint of excitement. When Ji Hongwen saw the box that Jinwan took out, his brows imperceptibly furrowed. Grandfather, this is a surprise for you. I believe you will definitely like it. Jinwan placed the box in front of Elder Mo's eyes, her smile sincere. Elder Mo was smiling. Before he could speak, Ji Minggran suddenly stared at the red sandalwood box. She spoke with a shocked expression. It can't be, big sister. This is the birthday gift you want to give to Grandfather Mo? Jinwan was unruffled. What is it? Ji Minggran maintained her shocked expression. Looking at the size of the box, what is inside? Could it be our family's early Tang chessboard? A few days ago Dad lost his most beloved antique. I didn't expect you to secretly take it away. Sis, I know you want to please Grandpa Mo, but you can't steal Dad's most treasured antique to present Buddha with borrowed flowers. At this moment, Ji Hongwen could barely sit still. My little daughter has a loose tongue. Elder Mo, please don't take offense. Wan would definitely not do such a thing. As for this jade chessboard. Shin Haru suddenly spoke up from the side. I was just saying that a few days ago, I felt that something was missing from the antique shelf in your study. I didn't expect that Jinwan had actually secretly taken it away. As she said that, Shin Haru shook her head and sighed. Although Wan wanted to give something good to Elder Mo with good intentions, after all, a married daughter is like spilled water. When she returned to her maternal family, she didn't even inform them before taking away such a valuable antique. Although this can't be considered stealing, it is indeed against the rules. Shut up. Because the Mo family was present, Ji Hongwen did not fly into a rage. Instead, he kicked Shin Haru harshly under the table, warning her not to speak carelessly. Shin Haru did not make a sound, but her gaze subtly shifted toward Jinwan. She did not believe that Jinwan would have the ability to clear her name with the evidence and witnesses present. After all, neither her maternal family nor in-laws' family could prove her innocence. Although this matter was not big, it was not small either. In the eyes of the two families, even if Jinwan's tongue was rotten, it would be useless. Jinwan maintained her calm smile. What chessboard? Minggran and Auntie Shin, why can't I understand a single word you're saying? It was truly an unexpected gain. This matter was actually not caused by Ji Minggran alone. She was still wondering how the chessboard could be taken out so easily. It seemed like Shin-Haru had helped her from behind the scenes. It was truly a flawless show. If it was the Jin Wan from her previous life who did not have her guard up against Ji Menggran, she would most likely be wronged to death. Even if Elder Mo suppressed this matter and helped her smooth things over, there would still be scolding behind her back. She would be mocked and ridiculed by her friends and family for the rest of her life. Big sister, don't play dumb. The chessboard is right inside. You can't possibly take back the gift that has already been delivered to Grandfather Mo. Ji Menggran raised her voice. Jin Wan glanced at her, an undetectable cold smile hidden in her eyes. Menggran, why are your words so strange today? Big sister, I'm doing this for your own good. Stop acting. You stole this jade chessboard from the early Tang dynasty and gifted it to Grandfather Mo. Even if Dad doesn't hold it against you now, this chessboard cannot be used as a birthday gift. Ji Menggran spoke while sighing. This chessboard belonged to a eunuch who caused chaos in the court during the early Tang dynasty. That eunuch was later sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts because of his conspiracy. After his death, his corpse was buried by his trusted aides. At the same time, this chessboard was buried with him. This was an item buried with him. Even if it is an expensive antique that is worth collecting, this kind of thing definitely cannot be used as a birthday gift. Ji Menggran's voice became softer and softer. It was as though she did not intend to say all this, but her voice was just loud enough for everyone to hear. Gifting this kind of thing, big sister, what are your intentions? Menggran. Ji Hongwen had originally planned to admit to her mistake after his initial shock. However, he did not expect Ji Menggran to actually say such a thing out loud. He immediately wanted to slap her to death. Ji Menggran had already spoken and could not take it back. She looked at Jin Wan fearlessly. However, she did not see any signs of shock, panic, or even fear on Jin Wan's face. She had finally found an opportunity to cause Jin Wan to lose her footing in the Mo family. She could not let it go so easily. All the relatives and friends present had differing gazes. However, because Elder Mo maintained a cold expression and did not speak, no one dared to casually slander her. However, in such a matter, even if the elder wanted to protect Jin Wan, he most likely would not be able to do so, right? On the elder's 80th birthday, she gifted a Tang dynasty eunuch as a burial item. Furthermore, it was a eunuch who died a horrible death by 1,000 cuts. This was simply unreasonable. Mo Jingshan sat by the side with an indifferent expression. Only when the show was almost over did he coldly sneer. Ji Menggran saw that Mo Jingshan did not immediately speak up to protect Jin Wan. She guessed that he also felt that Jin Wan had gone overboard with this matter. She then said, Brother Jingshan, I didn't mean to say such words in such a situation. Compared to my big sister's face, Grandfather Mo's health is more important. Gifting such an item is really not good. That's why Mo Jingshan's eyes carried a slight smile. He did not look at Ji Menggran but calmly glanced at the unopened red sandalwood gift box in front of Elder Mo. Chapter 78. Ji Menggran's expression stiffened. Because of Mo Jingshan's nonchalant words, all her efforts were immediately put on the table. She bit her tongue, turning to Shin-Haru for help. However, Shin-Haru did not look at her, only sitting by Ji Hongwen's side as though this matter did not concern her. Back then they had agreed not to drag her into this. Ji Menggran's chest felt stifled, but she could only endure it. She stared at the gift box. After all, with this thing here, Jin Wan would not be able to escape responsibility. From what I see, we should hurry and open the gift box to take a look. Ji Menggran insisted. Jin Wan smiled, calmly reaching out. However, the moment her hand touched the gift box, she suddenly received Elder Mo's gaze. The elder could tell that Jin Wan had fallen for his trap. To prevent her from being put on the spot, he used his gaze to warn her not to open the gift box. If it really was that thing, not only would he feel unlucky but many of the famous people present were also superstitious. If it really was what Ji Menggran said, Jin Wan really would not be able to find a way out. Jin Wan gave the elder a reassuring smile. Her hand gently pressed against the box, and the expensive red sandalwood gift box was instantly opened. The moment she saw the item placed neatly in the center, Ji Menggran, who had just stood up due to her agitation, immediately trembled. How was this possible? She had clearly handed it to Jin Wan earlier, but it was not. Seeing the item in the box, Ji Hongwen, who was by the side, immediately released a sigh of relief. However, he immediately furrowed his brows, coldly glancing at the petrified Ji Menggran. This brat was courting death. She had really thrown away the Ji family's face. "Grandfather, this is just a farce. I've let you watch a joke." Jinwan smiled leisurely. "When Jingshen and I went to buy a gift, Jingshen said that you have a preference for ancient chess. This ancient chess manual was left behind by the famous Gu Shiyan during the late Tang dynasty. It has been passed down from generation to generation and was carefully treasured by the imperial palaces. Even now it is still well preserved. I hope you will like it." Elder Mo was stunned for a moment as though he could not believe it. When he returned to his senses, he happily reached out to receive it. He opened it and flipped through it, happily nodding his head. "You, this child, are really thoughtful. This is indeed something that I've always wanted to collect but could not obtain. I never thought that I would be able to obtain it before I was born." Mo Jingshan raised his hand and gently pressed down, gesturing for Jinwan, who had been standing by the table, to sit down. When he spoke, his voice was the same as before. "Nuan specially requested the chess record for you. It took her a lot of effort." The old master nodded happily. He couldn't take his eyes off the chess record in his hand. He kept looking at it carefully page by page. Obviously he treasured it very much. Jinwan quietly held Mo Jingshan's hand under the table, whispering, "You clearly won it. How can you say that I begged for it?" Mo Jingshan's voice was low but gentle and clear. "My body is yours. The things I win, of course, are also yours." Jinwan? It was as if he had been flirted with again. Sitting across the table, Ji Mingran's face had already turned pale. She was flustered and wanted to say that Jinwan was clearly holding the chessboard, but now she was being stared at by all sorts of gazes. Her father was also giving her a warning look. She raised her eyes to look at Jinwan. For a moment she did not know how to smooth things over. What should she do now? The people seated were all very astute. Everyone could tell that she had purposely dragged Jinwan into the water earlier. How could she explain herself in a reasonable manner? It seemed like no explanation would make sense. "Mengran?" Jinwan's voice suddenly came. It carried a hint of coldness, and she had called out to her in front of everyone. Ji Mingran abruptly raised her eyes. Right now she was both afraid and hateful. The fear in her eyes could not be hidden. Jinwan's tone dragged out slowly, but it carried a hint of coldness that could not be ignored. "I'm afraid there must be some misunderstanding between us. This is also your first time at the Mo family home. Why don't you follow me to the backyard for a walk? Let's have a chat?" Ji Mingran's face paled. After so long, she already knew that Jinwan was no longer the same person who would allow herself to mess around. Aside from the Ji and Mo families, there were also many famous people present. She had really suffered a huge loss. Ji Mingran lowered her head and did not speak. However, she did not plan to follow her. Ji Hongwen angrily said, "Why aren't you leaving with your sister? Do you want to continue arguing in front of so many people? Your sister has already given you enough face." Elder Mo also abruptly said, "Indeed, I think there seems to be some misunderstanding between you sisters. This is the first time this old man has seen a younger sister frame her older sister in front of everyone. If you have anything to say, go to the back and speak." Ji Mingran's expression became even more flustered. Her eyes flickered, not daring to look at them or Jinwan. From the start, Jinwan did not plan to completely fall out with Ji Mingran so quickly. Firstly, she had not found a suitable opportunity. Secondly, she wanted to use this opportunity to clearly understand Ji Mingran's methods. However, right now, this opportunity was extremely suitable. Since Ji Mingran did not wish to have a good life, she could not blame her for being impolite. Ji Mingran followed Jinwan out of the banquet hall. Jinwan did not speak along the way. Ji Mingran followed behind, her heart secretly beating like a drum. When they reached a place in the Mo family's backyard where there were fewer people, Jinwan turned around. At the same time, Ji Mingran raised her head to stare at her. She seized the opportunity to speak first. "Sister, I'll be frank with you. Today's matter was indeed intentional. However, it was also because previously you, Pa." An extremely loud slap rang out. It was crisp and sudden, causing the helpers passing by to jump in fright. Ji Mingran was so shocked that she could not even maintain an expression. She did not dare to believe that Jinwan had actually slapped her. What was even more unbelievable was that the person who slapped her was the Jinwan who had always given in to her and doted on her since she was young. Ji Mingran raised her hand to cover her face. She was so shocked that the muscles on her face froze. After a long while, she screamed in disbelief, "Jinwan! You actually slapped me, Pa!" Another clean and ruthless slap flew over, causing Ji Mingran's face to turn to the side. Jin Wan's icy voice carried a frosty coldness. I slapped you. Shameless, shameless and endlessly seeking death. Ji Mingran screamed in anger. Jin Wan. She had never been slapped by anyone in her entire life. However, she was actually slapped by Jin Wan. She was even slapped twice. Ji Mingran was so angry that her entire body was trembling. Jin Wan. What I hate the most is your self-righteous arrogance. Why do you always have to stand on top of me? Why can you? Jin Wan coldly smiled, raising her hand to slap her again. Ji Mingran did not expect there to be a third slap. She was slapped silly and her entire face froze in place. That. Chapter 79. Because I'm your older sister. Because everything I've obtained is fair and above board. No matter how arrogant and conceited I was, I've never schemed against my own family or even thought about my own sister's husband. Ji Mingran, this is called being shameless. Jin Wan did not hesitate in the slightest. She did not give her any face. Ji Mingran was stunned. In the next moment she was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She did not expect Jin Wan to know everything. So, everything she did, Jin Wan saw it all? She deliberately beat her at her own game? Was that why the tables had turned so suddenly today? Ji Mingran suddenly felt afraid. She held onto her reddened face and sobbed weakly. I didn't think much of it. I just couldn't stand the way you treated Brother Jingshin in the past. I feel that you've let him down and let him down. That's why All of a sudden Ji Hongwen walked out. Clearly he had heard their conversation earlier. Jin Wan saw him and expressionlessly walked to his side. Dad, you handle this. Finishing her words, she walked out of the backyard without turning back. Ji Mingran turned back to see Ji Hongwen's heavy expression. She was so frightened that her face turned pale. Dad? Ji Hongwen did not speak. The moment Jin Wan walked away with her back facing them with a pa sound, he raised his hand and sent a slap toward Ji Mingran's face. Ji Mingran was caught off guard and was slapped to the ground. She raised her head, looking at the furious Ji Hongwen in fear. A chill of fear spread from her limbs and spread throughout her body. What you said earlier, was it all true? Ji Hongwen furrowed his brows. Ji Mingran looked at him, crying. I really just felt that older sister isn't worthy of Brother Jingshin and felt unfair for him. I can explain what happened today. Stupid. Ji Hongwen's eyes were filled with anger. How could I have a daughter like you? After so many years, I've seen many grudges between rich families, but I didn't expect my own daughter to do such a lowly thing. Ji Mingran looked at Ji Hongwen's expression, not daring to say a single word. Her entire face was pale to the point of being transparent. The guests at the banquet had already forgotten about the little episode just now, and the congratulatory words of birthday came one after another in the guest hall. Elder Mo responded with a smile and carefully placed the chess record that he had been holding in his hands like a treasure into the red sandalwood box. At the same time he called for Mo Jingshin to sit by his side. The grandfather and grandson sat together. Mo Jingshin's smile remained mild. After all, Elder Mo had seen everything that had happened earlier. Does that Ji Mingran have feelings for you? Elder Mo spoke in a low voice that only Mo Jingshin could hear. I understand the Ji family's situation. Ji Hongwen is a good person, but these two daughters lost their mother a long time ago. Now the Ji family's second daughter is so hostile toward Jin Wan. In my opinion, you should let Jin Wan go home less in the future. When you're free, bring her here more often. This old man doesn't have any other abilities, but I do have the ability to protect my granddaughter-in-law. Mo Jingshin smiled. All right. Coincidentally, Jin Wan returned at this moment. The moment she entered the guest hall, she saw Mo Jingshin sitting by grandfather Mo's side in a filial and considerate manner. His face carried a rare warmth and patience. Her heart trembled slightly. Mo Jingshin's tall figure lazily leaned against the back of grandfather Mo's chair. The lights in the guest hall shone through the antique decorations, illuminating half of the man's face. It was cold and noble like the clear grass and trees on a foggy day. However, it seemed as though the sunlight had penetrated through it, adding a touch of warmth that was approachable and approachable. Jin Wan accidentally fell into a trance. The people present were all elites of the upper class and important figures of various circles. They all had extraordinary statuses and unique auras. Everyone's presence could not be ignored. But even in such an occasion, Mo Jingshin was still the one who attracted the most attention. Regardless of whether it was his self-restraint or his every movement, he was always the center of attention. Jibrat, you're back. Grandfather Mo saw her and raised his hand to beckon her over. What are you standing there for? Come, sit by grandfather's side. Jinwan walked over. Originally, she wanted to go to the other side of Grandfather Mo, but for some strange reason she went to Mo Jingshan's side and sat by his side. Of course, she was not deliberately showing off her affection, but earlier, it was her instinct. Her feet did not listen to her and she moved closer to his side. Grandfather Mo saw all of this and smiled in a good mood. Taking the opportunity when a rich madam by the side leaned over to casually chat with Jinwan, he softly said to Mo Jingshan, "Previously you said that you're preparing for pregnancy. Is it true?" Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. "What do you think?" "TSK, what do you mean by, I think? I can see that the G family's girl is sincere toward you. Since the relationship between husband and wife is harmonious, you should take this opportunity to nurse her body back to health and give birth to the child as soon as possible. This way, this old man will be busy coaxing the child and won't have the time to worry about other things." Jinwan vaguely heard Grandfather Mo's words and turned her gaze over. However, the first thing she met was Mo Jingshan's gaze. Originally, she was slightly embarrassed by the topic of preparing for pregnancy. The moment she met Mo Jingshan's gaze, she saw his gaze that was as deep as the ocean. She felt that he really planned on agreeing to the elder just like that. The guests gradually dispersed. It was no longer early. Mo Jingshan was the eldest grandson of the Mo family. It was unavoidable that he drank a few cups of sake. Originally he planned on driving home, but he decided against it. Grandfather Mo asked him to stay the night in the Mo family's old residence. After they got married, Jinwan had not stayed in the Mo family home. It was only today that she found out that Mo Jingshan rarely came back to stay, but here, his room was cleaned every day. Although the Mo family's old residence was called an old residence, most of the buildings in the house were not old. Only the front three-story building with a simple front hall was somewhat old. However, the elder cherished the past and did not rebuild it. The few villas and pavilions at the back were all very beautiful. They were situated at the foot of the mountain range. It was said that the building closest to the mountain had a spring that was discovered several decades ago. However, outsiders were rarely allowed to soak in the hot spring. Only the Mo family had the right to do so. This place was situated at the foot of the mountain and had the fresh air. Furthermore, it was blessed with the peace and health that was hard to come by in the city center. In the middle of the house was a multi-story villa. The entire third floor belonged to Mo Jingshan. Chapter 80. In the dead of night. Jinwan could not find a hairdryer in the bathroom and came out with a towel wrapped around her hair. The moment she walked out, she saw that Mo Jingshan had just entered. He carried with him the chilly air of the autumn night and the fresh scent of the Mo family's old residence. Under the light, his expression was gentle. When he saw how she looked when she came out of the shower, his gaze deepened. By this time all the guests had already left. There was no need for Mo Jingshan to continue staying in the guest hall. When her father and Auntie Shen left, although their expressions were not as happy as the others, they still brought Ji Mingran into the car. At that time, Jinwan did not look at Ji Mingran's expression. From the corner of her eye, she could see that she was slightly disheveled. She did not even dare to greet her before entering the car and closing the door. Today, regarding the matter of grandfather's birthday gift, although I was not the one who suffered a loss, there were so many guests present. Earlier, when you sent them off, many of them must have mentioned this matter to you, right? Jinwan asked. Mo Jingshan lowered his head to glance at her. Today, the people who stayed behind all knew how to write the word propriety. Although they mentioned it earlier, once they stepped out of the Mo family's door, no one dared to say a single word to outsiders. Jinwan was startled. Ah, did you say something to them when I wasn't around? Don't worry about them. I'll deal with it. Mo Jingshan was unperturbed. You did well today. You killed the chicken to warn the monkey. In the future, those who are secretly against you will not dare to do anything to you. Be Mrs. Mo in peace. I'll handle everything. Oh. Then what did grandfather say? Of course he'll side with you. Although grandfather is old, he sees things very clearly. That's good. I don't mind leaving a bad impression in other people's eyes. But with Ji Mingran's actions today, although she did not receive any benefits, it can be considered a small farce. No matter how you look at it, it won't be good. Mo Jingshan's gaze was dark as he watched her. Grandfather will never let you suffer a loss in the Mo family. Tonight, there will definitely be someone who won't be able to sleep, but that person will definitely not be you. Jin Wan instantly felt as though she had eaten her fill. She pursed her lips. Regarding today's matter, my dad must be extremely angry. Both the palm of his hand and the back of his hand are meat. Both sides are his daughter. Mo Jingshan's voice was low and heavy, calm as usual. Do you think he didn't notice that Ji Mingran's actions weren't normal? It's just that he didn't want to say it out of respect for his daughter. In today's situation, he was also forced to this step by his second daughter. You didn't do anything wrong, don't take it to heart. Oh. Jin Wan raised her hand to hold up the towel that was about to fall off her head. She wiped her wet hair with the towel and paused for a moment before asking, "What about you? If I really fell for it today and lost all my face, what would you do?" Mo Jingshan lowered his gaze to look at the little woman who had just showered. Her face was still slightly damp, and he reached out to pinch her chin. You still have Shin Haru in front of you. Letting her off today is on account of the Sheng family and the Ji family. But if she really wants to push you into an unbearable situation, I don't mind using her severed son to threaten her. Let's see if it's more important to be at odds with you or her son's life and future. The man's voice was low and mild, but Jin Wan's heart was completely at ease. On the importance of having a good husband. Right now she completely understood that Mo Jingshan would only do one thing, and that was to give Jin Wan a sense of security that no one could replace. No matter what, he would definitely be able to help her solve any problem. Even if she was careless and fell for someone else's scheme, he would not give her a chance to lose. The next day, in order to merge her two small real estate companies into a large studio, Jin Wan sorted out the financial and project information. She was so busy that she forgot to eat and sleep. It was already past 10 o'clock in the evening, but Mo Jingshan had yet to return. Jin Wan stretched lazily and picked up her phone to check the time. She saw 2 missed calls from Xia Tian. She had been busy earlier and had a 2-hour video conference with the studio. She had switched her phone to silent mode. Jin Wan dialed Xia Tian's number, and the call was quickly connected. Xia Tian's voice was ambiguous. Wan, did your husband tie you to the bed? He's finally willing to let you take time to look at your phone? Jin Wan pursed her lips. Mo Jingshan should be busy tonight. He hasn't returned yet. He's not home? Then why did you take so long to call? I thought you and Mo Jingshan would have sex every night, doing all kinds of positions. Jin Wan turned to sit by the bed, picking up a pillow and hugging it in her arms. Can you stop thinking about such things? An unmarried man is even more ferocious than a married man like me. Xia Tian chuckled, sitting on the bed and taking a bite of watermelon. Jin Wan had not had time to go to the hospital recently. She asked tentatively, "Recently you've been so quiet. You haven't even called me a few times. Is someone accompanying you?" Xia Tian stuffed a lot of watermelon into her mouth. Her tone was muffled. How did you know? Jin Wan's heart sank. The man who knocked you earlier, is he chasing you? Xia Tian almost choked on the watermelon. She coughed several times before cursing hoarsely. What the heck, do you know how to calculate? I haven't seen you for a few days and you've become a half-immortal? Jin Wan's expression turned cold. As expected, Xia Tian's half-concealed and slightly bashful tone was very familiar to her. Everything was as she had expected. It was just that she hadn't visited him for a period of time, but that bastard still managed to take advantage of her. The next morning before 7 o'clock, Jin Wan directly drove to the hospital. She had just stepped out of the elevator and had yet to reach the door when she saw Xia Tian being supported by a tall and thin man from the public bathroom. Xia Tian raised her eyes to see Jin Wan. She was immediately shocked. Wan? Jin Wan did not say a word. Her gaze coldly swept past the man's face. She pushed open the door and walked in. Only when Xia Tian was supported in and sat on the bed did the tall man turn to look at Jin Wan. He reached out a hand to her and said politely, "You're the good friend Jin Wan that Tian often talks about? Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Li Minjian." Jin Wan appeared not to have heard him. She sat on the sofa by the side of the ward, expressionless. She was unprecedentedly cold. Chapter 81. Jin Wan's aura was too cold today. She did not give him any face at all. Xia Tian sensibly allowed him to leave first. When only the two of them were left in the ward, Xia Tian leaned against the bed. Wan, your aura earlier was 8 meters. It was so cool. Jin Wan's face was expressionless. What happened? Did you treat what I said earlier as a fart? Xia Tian clearly did not expect Jin Wan to be angry to the point of scolding someone. Her expression was slightly embarrassed. I didn't forget. This surnamed Lee has been chasing after me for many days. I never agreed. Why did he come to the hospital early this morning? A few days ago he came to the hospital again because of my hospital fees. We casually chatted for a while and then he often came to visit me. He is a gentleman, polite and considerate. I don't know how to reject his good intentions, but I swear, I don't have any feelings for him. After all, we haven't known each other for long. I can only say that I think he's not bad. So now you tacitly agree that he is chasing after you? Xia Tian acted as though she was a kindergarten student being lectured by the teacher. You can say that. After a long while, Xia Tian saw that Jinwan seemed to be really angry and said, "Don't be angry. We didn't go any further. It's just that he was going to fly to S City this morning. Before he went to the airport he first came to the hospital to see me. He was going to leave just now but I suddenly wanted to go to the washroom so he helped me there. But I swear he was waiting outside the washroom. There was absolutely no flirtatious or unnecessary contact between us." Seeing that Jinwan was expressionless, Xia Tian no longer joked around and became serious. "We definitely won't develop to the stage you think we are. Believe me. Only a fool would believe you." If it weren't for the fact that she could not speak about her rebirth, Jinwan really wanted to reveal the truth to Xia Tian and let her know how much she had fallen for this scum. She had been pregnant, miscarried, broken hearts and sent to death. Each and every one of them was a bloody lesson. "How's your leg?" After a moment of silence, Jinwan changed the topic. Xia Tian was caught off guard by the sudden change of topic. She paused for a moment before replying, "It's okay. If I hold a pair of crutches I can walk 2 laps around the ward. However, my leg bone hasn't been completely reconnected yet, so I don't dare to stand directly on the ground for now. I'll go ask the doctor and see if you can be transferred to another hospital." Jinwan stood up to leave. Hearing this, Xia Tian raised her eyebrows. "Transfer?" Jinwan turned back and glanced at her. "Even if the one surnamed Li was the one who injured you, you don't have to worry about the fees. From now on, you can cut off contact with your family. You don't want to go home now, but it's not like you're cutting off your relationship with your family. You have your card with you and you can afford any expenses. If you're afraid of trouble, leave the transfer to me. Just stay away from that scum." Xia Tian held her forehead. "You sound like my mother?" Jinwan paused and said, "I'm probably more worried than your mother right now. I even know a lot about that guy surnamed Li. Do you want to hear it? Your tone is very mysterious. Quickly tell me what's his situation." "He's the owner of a bank. His family already has a fiancée, but he likes to pretend to be a warm gentleman outside. Every few months he would pick up all kinds of innocent young ladies. Countless women have had abortions and broken hearts because of him." Xia Tian supported her chin with one hand as she sat on the bed. She nodded calmly. "And as expected, he's a scum. So, do you want to be the mistress that he secretly dates outside behind his fiancée's back? Or do you want to be slapped in the face by the various mistresses and fives that he continues to date?" Xia Tian rolled her eyes. "I already said that I don't have any feelings for him. At the very least, I haven't reached the stage where I have feelings for him, and you've already killed it. Then immediately transfer to another hospital. Tell him to scram as far away as possible." "If I want to transfer to another hospital, I have to get the doctor's signature, right?" "1-1, I was just about to ask you. Do you know my attending doctor?" Jinwan paused. After a few seconds she replied, "Not very familiar." "Not familiar?" That attending doctor of mine has a poker face every day. I heard from the nurses that his personality has always been so cold. At first, I didn't think it was a problem as long as my leg injury could be healed quickly. But I realized that every time I mentioned your name in front of him, his gaze seemed to be able to freeze me to death in an instant." Jinwan shifted her gaze. "Why did you mention my name in front of him?" "A good bestie. Usually, when I'm bored in the hospital, when I chat with the doctors and nurses, I can't help but mention you." Xia Tian spoke in a loyal tone. "How about it? See how much I love you." "Love my ass." But then again, that ice block face of his, and he always wears a mask. Up until now, I still haven't seen what he looks like. I only know that others call him Dr. Shen. If it wasn't for the fact that every time I mentioned you, his expression would become even colder, I wouldn't have asked you if you knew who he was. His temper is so bad. How did this kind of person become an orthopedic doctor? I heard that he's even a provincial expert." Jinwan's expression did not reveal any emotions. "Perhaps it's because the last 2 times I came to the hospital, I didn't secretly give him a red packet. He felt that I, as a patient's friend, wasn't very sensible. He doesn't seem like someone who would fuss over such a small profit. Tisk, it's fine if you're not familiar with him. Xia Tian's expression appeared as though she did not want to be frozen again. I think it's best if you don't look for him about the hospital transfer. If it doesn't work out, Dr. Sheng's face will most likely be covered in ice again. After a moment of silence, Jinwan said, I'll think of another way. I'll use my connections and try to get you transferred to another hospital before tonight. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Although Dr. Sheng's temper isn't good, his medical skills are still very good. If you're afraid that I'll meet that person again, at most I'll make things clear with him and stop interacting with him in the future. In any case, I don't have any interest in him. No, if you break it off, then break it off completely. You have to transfer. She could not leave even the slightest bit of hope. In this life, Jinwan definitely wanted to see Xia Tian happily grow old with a truly good man. She definitely would not allow any scumbag to get close to her. Xia Tian, Ioyo, our family's Nuan's domineering manner is actually a little handsome. Jinwan ignored her and was considering if she should ask Dr. Qin for help. At this moment, Xia Tian suddenly said, Damn, I forgot to look at the time. It's actually 6:50. Dr. Sheng comes every morning at this time for his ward rounds. Right now he should be almost here. She had just finished speaking when the sound of approaching footsteps could be heard from outside. Wan, do you want to hide for a while? Dr. Sheng's ice-cold gaze is very powerful. I'm afraid you won't be able to take it. Xia Tian wore a paparazzi expression that seemed to be sniffing out some gossip. She winked as she spoke. Chapter 82. Jinwan raised her eyes. Her gaze landed on the white silhouette that had just entered. Hi, Dr. Sheng. The moment the door opened, Xia Tian raised her small hands and waved at the person in front of the door. The man who entered was dressed in the hospital's white gown. His figure was tall and slender like a jade tree. The moment he saw Jinwan, he immediately furrowed his brows. When Jinwan's cold gaze landed on him, his brows furrowed even more. Dr. Sheng, I didn't have the chance to introduce you properly the past few times. This is the best friend I've always mentioned, Jinwan. Xia Tian introduced with an expression as though she wished for the world to be in chaos. Dr. Sheng's face below the bridge of his nose was covered by a mask, revealing only a forehead that was as clean as snow and a pair of eyes that were as cold as a river. For an instant, the room was so quiet that even the drop of a needle could be heard. Jinwan's gaze was cold and indifferent as she stared at him. There was even a hint of mockery in the corner of her lips. Their gazes met. In less than 2 seconds, Dr. Sheng's cold gaze moved away from her cold and imposing face. He calmly said, I've seen her before. I have some impression of her. Xia Tian appeared as though she had discovered a huge piece of gossip as she sat on the bed. She opened her mouth and was about to continue speaking when she was interrupted by Jinwan. Jinwan's exquisite features carried traces of coldness. Her words carried a hint of teasing. Dr. Sheng, I plan to help Xia Tian with the hospital transfer procedures today. You're her attending doctor. The transfer procedures will require your signature before we can proceed. I'll have to trouble you to sign for us. Transfer? Dr. Sheng's cold gaze finally shifted toward Jinwan. She doesn't want her legs anymore? What? She can't be transferred? Jinwan faced him expressionlessly. Right now, her legs can't withstand any movement. The slightest jolt on the bus will be enough to cause the unconnected bones to be slightly dislocated. If she plans on walking uncoordinated for the rest of her life or becoming a cripple, I don't mind signing for her to be released right now. As he spoke, Dr. Sheng's calm and indifferent gaze landed on Jinwan's face. Jinwan furrowed her brows imperceptibly. A fracture was indeed not a small matter. If there was even the slightest dislocation during the healing process, it would greatly affect Xia Tian's future. Although he had to guard against that scumbag, he couldn't let anything happen to Xia Tian's leg. It's fine if she doesn't want to transfer, but I'll have to trouble Dr. Sheng to keep a close eye on her ward. Don't let those people who don't know anything come in. Right now, the person closest to her is only me. If she's really too bored while she's in the hospital, Dr. Sheng can come and chat with her when you're not busy. This kind of request isn't too much, right? Xia Tian stared at them for a long time. She didn't see or hear anything from their conversation. After staring for a long time, she suddenly heard this sentence and her face turned green. Let this ice cube come to the ward to talk to her? It would be better to leave her alone. Dr. Xing didn't know how to say nice words to coax the patient, and he was a big iceberg. No matter what she said, he almost didn't care. If he really came to talk to her, it would probably be awkward from the moment he walked in. How awkward? Dr. Sheng's brows were cold. I don't have time. Xia Tian thought in her heart. That's right. He doesn't have time, so there's no need for this doctor to come and accompany her. However, Jin Wan unhurriedly curved her lips. She suddenly leaned closer to Dr. Sheng. Dr. Sheng's brows paused. Because of her approach, his dark eyes trembled. In that moment of absent-mindedness, he heard Jin Wan softly say with a smile that was not a smile. A few nights ago, something big happened at the bar on the east side of the city that alarmed the police and the media. At that time, I happened to pass by. If I didn't see wrongly, you were there as well. The man's brows were hidden behind his mask. He glanced at her, but his expression did not change. There was no hint of surprise. A doctor actually has time to go to a bar at night? I wonder what exactly he did there. Jin Wan stared at him, speaking unhurriedly. He only looked at her and did not speak. Can't you empathize with a patient who's lying alone in the hospital? Xia Tian has been taken care of by you ever since she was hospitalized. Regardless of the patient's emotions or physical condition, I believe that Dr. Xing should pay more attention to them. A doctor should be benevolent, shouldn't you? Jin Wan curved her lips at him, but her smile did not reach her eyes. Seeing that the two of them were actually whispering to each other, Xia Tian could not hear anything. She was so anxious that she wanted to jump out of the door. However, right now she could not even touch the walking stick by the bed, much less get off the bed. She could only glare in Jin Wan's direction with an unhappy expression. I heard that the Sheng family has two successors. One has cancer and the other has been detained for stealing trade secrets. Jin Wan raised her brows. I don't think you can be an orthopedic doctor for much longer. Dr. Sheng's gaze darkened. Jin Wan, what do you mean? What I mean is very simple. I want you to take good care of my friend and arrange a ward for her where no one can casually disturb her. If anything happens to her here, I will not hesitate to reveal what happened back then. Right now, it's a crucial time for you to officially return to the Sheng family. You need an honorable reason, but I, with a single word, can destroy your reputation. Jin Wan finished speaking and looked at him coldly. How is it, Dr. Sheng? My personality right now is not as easy to handle as it was several years ago. It's just a small request, are you still not going to agree? Dr. Sheng did not speak. After a moment, he said mildly as though he had no tone, You seem to know a lot about the Sheng family's matters. Jin Wan chuckled softly. I've already said what I need to say, Dr. Sheng. 10 minutes later, Jin Wan received a call and left. Xia Tian sat on the bed with a dazed expression. She watched the man who had one hand in his white pocket and did not leave for a long time. That Dr. Sheng. Xia Tian stared at him in shock. Are you going to continue your ward rounds? The man in front of the ward glanced at her. His gaze was indifferent, as though he did not have any emotions. Yes. What did Jin Wan mean by leaving this block of ice in her room? After not receiving a response for a long time, Xia Tian obediently laid on the bed, tugging the blanket upwards. Her gaze occasionally drifted toward the ice mountain by the door. It was as though a century had passed when Dr. Sheng's low and cold voice suddenly rang. What do you want to talk about? Xia Tian almost jumped up from the bed. She stared at him in astonishment. Her lips trembled for a long time before she swallowed her saliva. She carefully said, Really? The man furrowed his brows. His gaze remained cold and he did not speak. She did not expect that he would actually agree to Jin Wan's request. Xia Tian suddenly spoke as though she had been blessed. That chatting is secondary. If you don't want to talk, I won't force you. But, can you remove your mask for me to take a look? Dr. Sheng looked at her coldly. After a moment, he silently raised his hand to take off his mask. Chapter 83. MO Corporation. The doors to the large conference room on the 20th floor opened. The various levels of management filed out. Shen Mu followed behind Mo Jingshan, holding a stack of documents in his hands. As he read through them, he softly explained to Mo Jingshan several suspicious points from the meeting earlier. Mo Jingshan returned to the company's top floor. His long legs stepped out of the elevator. Secretary In, who had been waiting for a long time, approached him. COMO, the Ji family's miss is here. Earlier on, you were in a meeting, so I had her wait for you in the office. Secretary An's smiling eyes met his gaze. The Ji family's miss? Mo Jingshan's words did not waver. If the person who came was Jin Wan, and Shuyan would definitely not use such a form of address. Even if she did not address Jin Wan as Mrs. Mo, she would not use such confusing terms. Secretarian slowly smiled at him. "Co Mo, there are still some documents to tidy up in the secretary's office. I'll go get busy first." Mo Jingshan only listened and did not respond. He returned to the office. The moment he entered, he saw the so-called Ji family's Miss Ji Minggran was currently tidying up the documents on the CEO's office. There was a cup of freshly brewed coffee on the table. Mo Jingshan's expression was as cold as ice. "What are you doing here?" Ji Minggran raised her head and smiled at him. "Brother Jingshan, have you been very busy recently?" Mo Jingshan stood in front of the office door. The door was open but he did not enter. His cold tone became heavier. "This is not a place you can enter. Get out." Ji Minggran had just tidied up a stack of documents. Hearing his words, she obediently placed the documents back in their original positions. She then raised her eyes and smiled at him. "Earlier on, I only wanted to wait here for you and help you tidy up. Seeing that you don't even have a cup of coffee, I personally brewed one for you. Hurry and try it. I don't know if you prefer American or..." Mo Jingshan's brows were slightly stern. "The Mo Corporation doesn't lack secretaries or assistants. There's no need for you to do such things. I rarely drink coffee in the office. You can leave now." Ji Minggran didn't seem to hear his intention to drive her away. She moved away from his desk and walked closer to the door. As she walked, she said obediently, "I know. My sister has been spoiled for a long time. She can't do this kind of thing. I just helped you tidy it up." As she spoke, she paused, her gaze seemingly glued to his body. "Brother Jingshan, I can explain what happened at the Mo family that day." Mo Jingshan furrowed his brows. Ji Minggran bit her lip. "At that time I really didn't have any ill intentions. I just accidentally said the wrong thing. Then big sister slapped me hard on the face and I accepted it. I've never done anything wrong since I was young. The first time I did something wrong she slapped me hard 3 times. Today I'm here to..." Ji Minggran's eyes widened. After being grounded at home by her father for several days, she finally seized the opportunity to run out of the Ji family home when Ji Hongwen went to the neighboring city to discuss a collaboration. Shen Haru did not look at her too harshly. Ji Minggran had thought about it for the past 2 days. Since Jin Wan had made things clear that day, she couldn't act the way she did in the past. If she wanted to obtain this man, she had to adapt to the situation. As long as she persevered, she did not believe that Mo Jingshan would not be able to see her sincerity. 3 slaps? It seems like Jin Wan was merciful. Based on your uninvited actions today, it's only right for her to slap you 10 times. Mo Jingshan expressionlessly interrupted her. Ji Minggran suppressed the unwillingness in her heart. She choked for a moment before saying, "Did you really not notice that Jin Wan has changed a lot?" In the past, her words and actions were very straightforward. She would never beat around the bush when doing things. But the current Jin Wan, no matter what she says or does, it seems like there's a purpose to it. She hides a lot of thoughts. I suspect that the reason she suddenly approached you is because she has some ulterior motives. Brother Jingshan, you mustn't be deceived by her. Although she knew that Mo Jingshan would not easily pay attention to her words, Ji Minggran still wanted to remind him that Jin Wan's change was definitely not that simple. It had already been so long. She did not believe that he had not suspected Jin Wan's change. Mo Jingshan's lips curved up imperceptibly. It seemed like a smile, but it was cold and devoid of warmth. Ji Minggran instinctively tensed up. The Ji family's second miss came to my place to stir up trouble, and the person she's stirring up is even her own sister. Is this how your Ji family's upbringing is? Ji Minggran composed herself and smiled meaningfully. Our Ji family's upbringing? Brother Jingshan, can't you see it more clearly in my sister? Mo Jingshan's lips curved even deeper. His gaze also became much colder. Ji Minggran did not look directly into his eyes. In the past, the one who caused trouble in front of you was clearly Jin Wan. Brother Jingshan, you're so good to her. She's not worthy of your protection. In the past, she didn't seem to have a good upbringing in front of you. So, what's so good about Jin Wan? If you had even half of Jin Wan's upbringing and awareness, you wouldn't be thinking about your sister's husband. Mo Jingshan's thin lips spat out these cold words. He was extremely harsh. Scram. Ji Minggran's face instantly turned red and white. After being stiff for a long time, she bit her lips harshly. Brother Jingshan, I just want to talk to you more. I don't have any other intentions. There's nothing wrong with liking someone. Besides, back then Jinwan only married you unwillingly. It's only a family marriage. If it weren't for the fact that I'm still a year away from the legal age of marriage, perhaps the person who married you would be me. Mo Jingshan was cold and indifferent. Do you think that if the Mo family randomly shoves a fiancée into my hands, I'll definitely marry her? Ji Minggran heard the hidden meaning in his words and secretly furrowed her brows. Did he mean that if it wasn't for Jinwan, he would not have agreed to marry her? She took a deep breath and suddenly turned around to pick up the coffee on the office table. She walked over and said earnestly, "Brother Jingshan, no matter what you think, I've already said it. This is the coffee I personally brewed. Try it." Mo Jingshan was unmoved. Ji Minggran insisted, "It's really delicious. I remember that in the past, Jinwan didn't even know how to brew coffee. I don't think I'm worse than Jinwan in any way. I can even improve myself for you. Right now, I don't even know what Jinwan's motives are. I'm afraid that one day you'll be hurt by her." The coffee was handed over, but Mo Jingshan did not take it. He did not even have the intention to extend his hand. His tone was mild. "I don't hit women. Are you going to scram yourself, or are you going to call the Mo Corporation security up?" Ji Minggran did not have any intention of leaving. She continued to stare at him. At this moment, the sound of high heels hitting the ground could be heard from outside the office. Chapter 84. Secretarian saw the displeasure in Mo Jingshan's eyes and softly explained, "Xiao Mo, when you were in the meeting, the front desk called and said that Miss Ji wanted to see you. I thought it was Mrs. Mo, so I did not dare to let them stop her and directly let her in. When she came up, I only recognized her as the second miss of the Ji family. However, she had already arrived at the office and said that she had something important to discuss with you. I saw that she was Mrs. Mo's family member and could not be considered an outsider, so I made the decision to let her enter the office." Mo Jingshan's eyes and brows were cold as he smiled. To be able to make such a low-level mistake, Secretarian, it seems like America's high evaluation of you needs to be examined. Secretary Ann's expression slightly hardened. After 2 seconds she softly said, "Xiao Mo, I'm very sorry. In the future, I won't make such a mistake again. I won't let anyone unrelated to the company in, much less let them enter your office." Mo Jingshan's expression was unreadable. "Jinwan is also unrelated to the company. When she comes, what do you plan to do?" Secretary Ann did not immediately reply. After a moment of silence she replied, "If it's Mrs. Mo who comes to the company, I will first call Xiao Mo to ask for instructions." After asking, "I ask for instructions?" From the corner of Mo Jingshan's eyes, he coldly glanced at Ji Minggran who was still standing there. He only glanced at her indifferently before speaking to Secretary Ann coldly, "Is this your true plan?" Secretary Ann lowered her eyes. Her voice was still calm and gentle. "Xiao Mo, I don't understand what you're saying. Aside from Jinwan, anyone who comes to the company to ask to see me, have them look for Shenmu first. If there's a need, have him let them in." Mo Jingshan placed one hand in his pocket. The door to the office was closed. His voice was low and calm, neither fast nor slow. "As for Secretary Ann, I should indeed ask for instructions from America to see if there's a need to keep you in the Mo Corporation." The 2 words "ask for instructions" were inadvertently emphasized by Mo Jingshan, causing one to feel a chill. Secretary Ann instantly pursed her lips and raised her eyes. "Xiao Mo, if you think that letting Mrs. Mo's sister up today was a wrong decision, you can punish me according to the employee rules. In these few days that I've been in the Mo Corporation, other than abiding by my duties, I've never done anything wrong. If CEO Mo wants to send me back to America now, won't that seem a little too selfish?" The corners of Mo Jingshan's lips curved into an unnoticeable, cold smile. "I'm selfish? What is Secretary Ann's motive for doing today? I only let the Ji family's daughter up because I considered that she is Mrs. Mo's." Secretary Ann calmly explained. "From now on, you can use this as a logical excuse to remind me that I should distinguish between business and private matters in the company. From now on, even if it's Jinwan, she will have to go through you before she can enter the company?" Mo Jingshan narrowed his eyes, interrupting her. His face was clear and light in a smile, but it caused one to tremble. Secretary Ann perfectly displayed her good upbringing. She smiled slightly and revealed a bit of stubbornness. "I'm only trying my best to do my job. The CEO's office is not a domestic market. There should be rules. Previously, I saw that you allowed Mrs. Mo to enter and leave as she pleased, so I thought that you would not be too strict with her sister. Secretary Anne's expression changed. Her voice paused. In order not to anger him, she softly said, I've just arrived at the Mo Corporation. 2 days ago, I didn't stay for too long at the Mo family home before leaving. I'm not particularly familiar with CEO Mo's habits and the people around you. I'm very sorry for this mistake. In the future, I definitely won't make it again. There's no future, Mo Jingshan slowly and coldly said. Secretary Anne's brows furrowed. COMO. Mo Jingshan's voice was very low, revealing an unapproachable coldness. 4 days later, America's Shine will be signing a contract in the country. After the collaboration dinner, you'll go back with them. Secretary Anne gripped the documents in her hands tightly. She could barely maintain the calm she was supposed to have. COMO, are you in such a rush to chase me back to America? Shine suits you better, he coldly said. Secretary Anne was silent for a long time. After a long while, she raised her eyes and softly said, 4 days later, is it? Then in the 4 days that I'll continue to work by your side, I'll continue to abide by my duties and do what I need to do well. I'll also prepare for the handover in 4 days. In the past few days, thank you for taking care of me. Mo Jingshan appeared as though he did not hear anything. He had already entered the office. At the same time, his gaze coldly glanced at Ji Menggran, who was still standing by the door. His voice, however, was directed at the person outside. Bring this person out the way you brought her in. Secretary Anne turned to look at Ji Menggran. Ji Menggran still wanted to say something, but when she received Secretary Anne's warning gaze, she paused for a moment. She could only softly say, Brother Jingshan, Secretary Anne is a very good person. Don't send Secretary Anne away because of me. After speaking, she appeared to be very understanding as she walked out. The office door closed with a pang. Ji Menggran glanced at the closed door and softly complained, I really don't know what he's thinking. What's so good about Jinwan? She has so many tricks up her sleeves and often flaunts her love. Brother Jingshan is such a low-profile person, yet he allows her to flaunt her love. Furthermore, Secretary Anne did not speak. She only looked at the door that isolated them outside. She had known Mo Jingshan for many years. She could tell that he was mature and calm. She also understood that he was low-profile and reserved. Accompanying a woman to flaunt their love was something that he would disdain to do. Did he really love Jinwan that much? Mo Nwan Studio, conference room. Jinwan came directly after receiving the call from the hospital. The two companies had just merged into a studio. There were still many complicated matters waiting to be dealt with. Before entering the conference room, she sneezed twice. She clearly did not catch a cold recently. Why did she suddenly sneeze? Who was scolding her behind her back? Boss Nwan, the meeting is about to begin. Are you feeling unwell? Xiao Ba, the intern assistant who had just arrived, asked with concern. I'm fine. Jinwan walked in. Today was the first management meeting after merging the two companies into Mo Nwan Studio. After Jinwan sat down, she looked around at everyone's expressions. She had a rough idea of what was going to happen. After all, they were the management left behind by Han Tianyuan. What had to happen would happen sooner or later. Half an hour into the meeting, the HR manager stood up and said, Miss Ji, I've decided to resign. Jinwan's gaze was calm as she glanced at him. Reason? It's impossible for me to work under a 20-year-old woman. A young lady wants to lead these two companies, vainly try to interfere in the real estate industry, and even merge into some studio. From the way I see it, your concept and thinking of the company are not mature enough. The management system of the studio is also very weak. There is no future for me to develop here. Chapter 85. Jinwan calmly sipped the coffee that Xiao Ba had just handed over and did not immediately respond. Afterward, several other managers stood up. Most of them were important managers or department heads. I'm sorry, we also intend to resign. Jinwan put down the coffee, her lips curving into an unfathomable smile. Anything else? The conference room fell into silence once more. It was as though everyone could imagine how flustered and helpless Jinwan must be right now, and how she had lowered herself to beg them not to leave because of the lack of suitable managers. However, no one expected that Jinwan's response would be such a cold word. The HR manager who had taken the lead paused. Miss Ji, what do you mean by this? The few of us resigned after careful consideration. We did not discuss it in private. Are you implying that we deliberately incited everyone to leave with us? Jinwan calmly raised her brows. Did I say that? You took the initiative to resign. Firstly, I didn't reject you. Secondly, I didn't give you any face. Why are you so agitated? Seeing her indifferent attitude, the HR manager felt that he was being looked down upon by a 20-year-old girl. Originally, he wanted to give her a show of strength. However, he did not expect that this young lady of the Ji family, who was once famous in Haicheng, was completely unmoved when it came to management. The expressions of the managers who had just submitted their resignations all changed. The conference room was deathly silent. Those who have submitted their resignations today after the meeting ends, go to the finance department to collect your salaries, Jinwan unhurriedly said. Those who remain, if you have any thoughts on the studio's development, I'll give you 3 days to write a letter and send it to my email. After the studio is officially established, the salaries of the remaining managers and employees will be doubled. Jinwan took another sip of coffee, calmly glancing at the various expressions in the conference room. Where were we? Let's continue the meeting. By the time the meeting ended, it was already past 8 in the evening. Jinwan walked out of the conference room with Xiaoba following closely behind her. Boss Nuan, did you notice that those people's faces looked like they couldn't hold it in anymore? Jinwan curved her lips. Ever since these two companies fell into my hands, those subordinates who used to follow Han Tianyuan have all harbored their own thoughts. If they want to leave, they can leave. Could it be that they are waiting for me to ask them to stay? With that, she looked back at Xiaoba. But why do you always call me Boss Nuan? Xiaoba shyly raised her hand and pushed up the black-rimmed glasses on her face. A few days ago, everyone called you COG, but those managers all said that you're too young to be called COG. Didn't they just call you Miss G in the conference room? I can't stand their stares and I don't want to lose my job in the studio, so I call you boss. Jinwan, Han Tianyuan, that trash, what kind of people did the company recruit? Most of the management didn't have much ability, and the few who took the initiative to resign today were just what she wanted. Among the remaining employees, there were many who were lazy and did not have any professional knowledge of the market. This seemingly diligent and energetic intern assistant turned out to be a nerd with a slightly low EQ. His straightforwardness could only be described as cute. At the same time, Jinwan glanced at an office not far from her. Several secretaries were secretly putting on makeup in front of the computer. Their eyes glanced out and caught sight of her. Frightened, they hurriedly hid the makeup bag in their hands into the drawer. Jinwan was about to enter when all of a sudden her phone rang. She picked up the phone, glancing toward the office once more. Mo Jingshan's voice that was as pleasant as a clear spring came from the other end of the phone. You didn't go home? And I'm still in the studio. I just dealt with some management matters and will be heading back soon. After receiving the call, Jinwan's stern expression instantly softened. Studio? I merged the two companies I bought from Han Tianyuan and renamed it Mo Nuan Studio. How about it? This name sounds good, right? Mo Jingshan chuckled softly. Not bad. Jinwan was about to ask for some credit for this name and see if the great CEO Mo would give her some face and officially give it a name. Before she could open her mouth, she heard Mo Jingshan ask, "Where's the studio's location?" "A Jinlin building." "You drove?" "I did, but there's no parking lot here." The car was parked a little far. As she spoke, Jinwan glanced out the window. It was actually raining outside. It was already autumn. At this time it was raining heavily. The temperature outside would most likely be very low. "Wait, I'll come pick you up." After speaking, the man hung up the phone. Jinwan did not bring an umbrella with her. There were too few parking spaces nearby, and the car was parked a little far away. If she just went out like this, it would definitely not work. Since her husband had decided to come pick her up, there was no reason for her to stand on ceremony. However, this place was quite a distance away from MO Corporation. Furthermore, it was currently a rainy night. The road conditions were most likely not good, and the traffic was heavy. Jinwan decided not to rush. She turned around and entered the office. When the secretaries in the office saw Jinwan enter, they subconsciously stared at the computer in front of them, pretending to be working overtime. Today's overtime is because the various departments are busy organizing the company's information and connecting the various departments. "Do you all have nothing to do?" Jinwan asked. One of the especially beautiful secretaries glanced around. Seeing that no one answered, she coughed and spoke up, "I'm a secretary." "Those matters are not under our control, secretary?" "Then what about them?" "We're also secretaries." The other young secretaries also spoke up. Their eyes would occasionally glance at Jin Wan, observing if the legendary #1 socialite of Haicheng was really that beautiful. Previously there were only 2 small companies. Why are there so many secretaries? Jin Wan turned back to glance at Xiao Ba. Secretaries were not the same as secretaries. To put it nicely, they were called secretaries. To put it bluntly, they were just little girls who worked part-time as typists and photocopied documents. Xiao Ba lowered her head and did not dare to speak. Jin Wan glanced at her again. Xiao Ba then softly said, "It's because Xiao Han used to be here, that he hired them to be secretaries." "Why did he hire so many?" Xiao Ba lowered her voice even more. "Because they're beautiful." When they came to apply, even if there weren't any suitable positions, Xiao Han would arrange for them to be in the secretary's office, which happens to be facing his office. Jin Wan's temples instantly throbbed. As expected, she was scum. "Bring out their information. Let me take a look." Xiao Ba made an "oh" sound and rushed to look for the information. The so-called secretaries in the office all perked up their ears to hear their conversation. One of them felt that she would not be able to stay here for long. She stood up unwillingly and began to silently pack her things into her bag, planning to leave. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.